Okay. Are we ready to go? Yep, lovely. Good morning, Borodar, everyone. My name is Councillor Cheryl Carlisle, and I'm the Chair of the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, which is a multi-location meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available, and for those attending remotely to choose your language of choice, please. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those attending remotely, please use the raised hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and remote attendees. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility, so please let member services know if you have a particular issue. Committee members who are attending remotely are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, pop a message in the chat function so the Democratic Services Officer is aware, and then let us know when you return. Can I stress that I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers, and anyone in the public gallery. When I open up the debate to members, I will ask committee members to speak and put the questions first, followed by non-committee members. It would be helpful if members can ask all their questions in one go. Whilst I do not wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that any questions should be focused on the subject matter and to avoid repetition. If I feel the length of individual speeches are negatively impacting on the overall time for discussion and becoming unmanageable, I will defer to the committee's rules of procedure, which limits length of speeches to 5 minutes. Wish mine was. Okay, moving on to the agenda. I'd like to welcome Councillor Aaron as the new member of the committee. Borodar Aaron, you're online. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Dilwyn, who's been my trusty vice chair for the last year and a half, I think. I thank him very much for all his work and wish him well in his new role as a cabinet member. So we now move on to item 1, appointment of vice chair. Could I have any nominations, please? Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. Could I nominate Councillor Chris Hughes, please? He has a wealth of experience. He's been representing his residents on Conway Council for 25 years, and I think he'd be an excellent support to yourself, Councillor Cheryl. Thank you.
Dear Councillor Hannah. I also have Councillor Harry. Yeah, Councillor Harry.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to propose Councillor Gareth Jones. I think Gareth has a wealth of experience, particularly in the financial sector, when it comes to both the banking sectors and the social housing sectors. Obviously, social housing is a really, really important area of focus for this council. I think he'd be an excellent support for you in your role as chair of this committee, and I think he'd make a really positive benefit to the work that you and your other scrutiny chairs and vice chairs play in terms of local democracy. So I'd like to propose Councillor Gareth Jones. Thank you.
Councillor Harry. Could I have any other nominations? No. Is anyone going to second Councillor Hannah's nomination? Oh, Councillor Andrew online. Would anyone like to second Councillor Gareth's nomination? I will second that one. Thank you. So we will go to the vote. We will take the first one, Councillor Chris. Councillor Hannah's proposed Councillor Chris Hughes. Could those show in favour of that, please? Eight. Okay, and then we'll do Councillor. Yeah. Anyone? Yes, sorry. Anyone against that?
Well, no.
So,
you can take the vote for Councillor Gareth.
I wasn't feeling very well this morning. Yes. Can we take the vote for Councillor Gareth, please, in support of Councillor Gareth? and 2 online. So that's Councillor Chris. Congratulations, Councillor Chris. Can I please remind Councillor Chris that attendance is really important to this. I know that you haven't been able to attend the last 2 frosks and haven't sent any apologies or anything. So it would be really good, good attendance. So welcome. Would you like to come and take your seat up here, please? Thank you.
I'd just like to take you up on that statement there. Councillor Chris Hughes represents us on the Fire and Rescue Authority.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Councillor Chris Hughes represents us on the Fire and Rescue Authority, whose meetings clash sometimes with these meetings, and I'm quite sure he will have been sending in apologies because he would have been at that meeting. I think that was quite a out of order thing to say.
It's not out of order. It's in the minutes. If you have a look, he hasn't attended the last 2, Councillor Hanley. You will see from the minutes. And I know how important we all take attendance to scrutiny. Welcome, Councillor Chris. Settle yourself now. Have you got earphones? Okay, we now move on to item 2, apologies for absence. Sally, have we any?
No apologies received,
No
Chair.
apologies. Lovely, thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Now, Matt is just going to have a quick word with us about this because of the item that's coming up this morning. So, Matt, if you'd like to.
Well, the only one that occurs to me, Chair, that there may be declarations is in respect of council tax. So any members that have either second homes or long-term empty properties may wish to declare personal and prejudicial interest in that item, Chair.
Your hand up from Councillor Chris Cater in the room. Councillor Chris.
Borodar, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to declare for that item, agenda item 11, as my wife has one of the properties that is part of the deliberations this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Anyone we have online? I'll start with Councillor Anne, then Councillor Sean and Councillor Abdul. Councillor Anne, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a personal interest in an unoccupied long-term family property, which is currently going through probate. I'm not the executor. So as far as I understand, it's just a personal interest, not a prejudicial interest, but perhaps Matt can clarify.
Essentially, any property that will be impacted by the proposals today in terms of council tax, I would advise that's both personal and prejudicial. I'm not aware of the full circumstances, Councillor Anne, but if it falls within that category, then it would be personal and prejudicial, would be my advice. Otherwise, it's perhaps just a personal declaration of a personal interest for transparency.
I'm happy to take your advice and just be excluded from that part of the meeting.
Thank you, Matt. Next, we go on to Councillor Sean.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I personal and prejudicial interest in the council tax premiums. My sister still owns my mum's house and I'm still emptying it, so I'd leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sean. Next, Councillor Abdul.
Thank you, Chair. I too want to get advice from Marcus. I have a second property for staff accommodation. It's not empty, but I do have a second property. I just want to ask Matt, do I need to declare interest? It's not empty.
Councillor Abdul, it depends whether or not the council tax rises would apply to your circumstance in respect of that second property. If it does, then I would advise that's personal and prejudicial. And if it doesn't, then it's probably just a personal interest only.
In which case, I play safe, Chair. I would like to be excluded from that debate.
Thank you, Councillor Abdul. Is that Councillor Sue? I see. Yes, Councillor Sue, please.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I have got a second property, so it is personal and prejudiced, and I will be departing the building. My own building. Thank you, Chair.
You don't have to go that. You don't have to go that far, Councillor Sue. Just go and get a cup of coffee. But thank you. Anyone else? I hope we've got enough people left when everyone's declared. So, okay, that's great. So thank you for that, Matt, for that clarity. We now move on to item 4, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Okay, item 5, the minutes. We start with 12th of August 2024, pages 4 to 12. Could I have a proposer and seconder, please? Councillor Gareth. Councillor Abdul. Would everyone like to show, please? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Anyone abstaining? No. Okay, those are carried. We now move on to pages 13 to 20, the minutes of the 2nd of September 2024. Proposed and seconded, please. Councillors Harry and Gareth. Councillor Hannah, thank you. So could we have a show of hands, please? Anyone against? No. Any abstentions? No. Those are carried. Thank you, members. Oh, and the next one, item 6, minutes of the informal meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee chairs, pages 21 to 24. I have a proposer and a seconder. Who was there? Were you there, Councillor Hannah? Yes, Councillor Hannah will propose. Second, anyone that was there? No. Anyone else like to second? Councillor Harry, thank you very much. Show of hands, please. And online, anyone against? No, those are carried. Wonderful. Item 7, gosh, lots of minutes this morning. Minutes of the Conway Opportunities Board, pages 25 to 26. A proposer and seconder for those, please. Councillor.
Chair, can I just ask a question on this? On minute number 4, sorry, it's not coming up on my screen at the moment.
Okay.
There was the dashboard, the overview of the dashboard, and though we're scaling down the projects, it refers to slightly higher risks. Is that overview document available to all councillors?
Ian, would you like to answer that, please, Charlie?
Yeah, we can circulate that. They tend to come through different reports to different democratic meetings, but we can certainly circulate it because I think it should be in the public. It is. There's nothing in it that's confidential. I don't think it's just the update and the risk assessment on the project, so we can share that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if I could have a if you're content with that, Councillor Paul, proposer and a seconder, please. Councillor Harry, anyone second? Councillor Gareth, would you all like to show, please? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Any abstentions? No. Those are carried. We now go on to item 8, questions to Cabinet members. I'll be relieved to hear their honour this morning. Item 9, we're going to review the forward work programme, and Dawn Hughes, our scrutiny committee officer, is going to take us through that. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. So I just want to advise you of the following. So representatives from Ambition North Wales will be attending our next meeting on the 21st of October. Just so you're aware, I think Councillor Paul has raised a few queries. So I think there'll be representatives in attendance to discuss the investment strategy. So just so you're aware, the business case for the office accommodation strategy phase 2 will be presented to our meeting on the 18th of November. And I think there was a query raised at the last meeting. I wasn't in attendance. The Asset Management Task and Finish Group. A draft framework is currently being developed for the Asset Management Plan, and the Head of Housing will be discussing with the Cabinet member and the Chair of the Task and Finish Group, that's Councillor Andrew Wood, to look at whether any further amendments are required to the terms of reference for the Task and Finish Group, which obviously will have to come here for approval. So that's my update, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Any questions, members? Any observations? Councillor Anne online and Councillor Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. My sort of query, Dawn, is just around the budget setting and the different meetings that FROSC will have in terms of this. I'm not quite clear. When will FROSC be presented with the budget reduction proposals that have been agreed by the Officer Budget Working Group? I can't make my mind up from the actual plan when that will be.
the business planning framework is on the agenda today. So once that's been agreed, I'll make sure the forward plan is updated following that, Anne.
Because I'm thinking, is that going to be the 6th of January, really, is my question, because it's not quite clear. But if you could clarify, Dawn, that would be great.
Right, yes, I will do.
Amanda's just going to come in, Councillor Anne.
Yes, Councillor, and that's the one I would anticipate it being at, the one on the 6th of January.
Okay, thanks, Amanda.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Anne. Now, Councillor Andrew online.
Thank you, Chair. I presume you can hear me okay.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Morning, members. Just a quick one. Dawn's not answered it properly, really. Page 64, asset management plans. There's no date in the forward work programme. I haven't seen the terms of reference, probably from 2019. So I'll have a look at those. We'll work with Katie Clubb and the chair. Sorry, not chair. Bledden on that one. We can get cracking because I know Councillor Nigel, portfolio holders, asked us to do that. Just in consideration for your scrutiny committee chair, we've got a page 51, a waste and recycling action plan. I'm not sure what that is because it's gone to economy of place, but is there a financial impact to that, and do we need to look at that or view that? Does it need to come back here?
Where's Councillor Gromley gone? Oh, he's there.
I can answer that.
Oh, okay,
And
Dawn.
Councillor Andrew, it's actually the Audit Wales inspection. The action is in response to the Audit Wales inspection. So the action plan will come here to economy in place for members to agree that they're happy with the actions to respond to the recommendations within the report.
So it's a Welsh Government external report, regulatory report, and there's no financial impact or nothing we need to consider.
I don't know, Councillor. I have not seen the action plan as yet.
Okay, I'm just interested to bear that in mind. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Have we got any more comments on the forward work programme? No. If not, then could I have a proposer and seconder, please, for the forward work programme? Councillor Harry, Councillor Chris, if everyone would like to show. Thank you. Anyone against? No. Any abstentions? No. That's carried. Thank you, members. Move on to item 10, to appoint a representative from the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee to sit on the Affordable Housing and Housing Quality Adaptations and Acquisitions Project Board. Have I got any nominations, please? I'd like to, no one's popped up yet, I'd like to nominate Councillor Gareth for, there you go, it's Monday morning, Gareth. Yes, keep busy. I'd like to nominate Councillor Gareth, given his particular expertise in this field. I think he'd be a really good addition to the board. So that's my proposal. Have I a seconder? Councillor Sharon? Any other? Is that any more nominations, or Councillor Andrew? No. Okay. No more nominations. Well, would you like to show on that, please, members, in support? 5, 6. That is carried, members. I can't see any against. Everyone was unanimous with that. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Councillor Gareth. You can shout to me later. Okay, item 11, council tax premiums on long-term empty homes and second homes, pages 67 to 268. I will let all members in the chamber that are declared to leave, and everyone online that needs to leave. Wait for, yeah, can we? Okay. Yes, Councillor Sean's left. Councillor Sue's gone. Can we see any more? Councillor Chris? No. Okay, members, thank you. We've got a public speaker for this item, so please can I welcome Mr. Graham Wood to the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Wood. If you'd like to come down to the lectern as we've discussed. And there's a glass of water there for you. Thank you very much.
Can I sit somewhere where I can read this at the same time?
You have to stand at that microphone.
I sit there? No.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
it
can
would
put
just
that
be easier for
microphone on.
us to
Yes,
read what we'd
absolutely.
like to say.
Yes, if you
Yeah.
take time to set yourself up now. Lovely, thank you. And once you're settled, you'll have 3 minutes. Sally will let you know when there's approximately 30 seconds left to go. So she'll start it when you're ready, and welcome.
Bore da, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Graham Wood. I'm originally from Wrexham, currently living in Amersham, and I have a second home in Deganwy. I request the council consider keeping the premium on second homes at 100% for 25-26. Housing, as you know, and as I have discovered from my detailed research, is a complex and emotive topic, and Conway has significant challenges. The evidence in your pack suggests this policy is working. So if people are selling and are discouraged from buying, why increase the premium? Especially given the impact it has on second homeowners. I bought mainly to provide care to my parents who have lived here for 25 years. My father had a stroke and cannot walk unaided. My mother is virtually blind, so we have spent up to a third of our time here helping them. On reading the consultation, I was shocked to see how many people are negatively impacted. A Welsh-speaking lady born in Llandud, feeling forced out. The man from 3 generations of locals who inherited a house he plans to retire in, who cannot afford it. According to the assessment in your pack, the negative consequences of increasing the premium are largely financial. This is perhaps a narrow view, as it is affecting the mental health of many struggling to pay or worried that they cannot sell. I agree, those with the broadest shoulders should support those less fortunate. However, I question whether the current proposal delivers the fair compromise that your equality policy aims for. Even people who are brought up here state they feel discriminated against and not heard. One aspect of the policy I am struggling to understand is how second homes sold will help solve the housing issues. The affordable housing need is apparently in the council tax bands ABC, which are only 47% of the 1,600 second homes. So less than half of homes sold will be available to solve housing issues. The more expensive properties will be bought by others who can afford the premium, or full-time residents that cost more in healthcare, etc. As a councillor said to me, this policy is a blunt instrument. It does not consider individual circumstances or targeting needy areas like the urban villages. The equality assessment asks specifically, have the affected people been given the information and the opportunity to influence the outcome? It doesn't appear they have. I propose 2 actions for consideration. Firstly, pause at 100%, allow time for the policy to have its full impact. It appears many in the council would prefer this option, and it would allow a full evaluation of the unintended consequences on avoidance, tourism, the housing market and the local economy.
So, thank you, Mr. Wood.
Secondly,
That's
reflect and
If you
conduct an inclusive consultation, setting up a focus group to enable a meaningful discussion. So please.
Thank you very much,
pause and
Mr. Wood.
reflect.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you very much
Thanks
for
very
that.
much for your time.
Deal. Okay, members, we're now going to go, the leader is going to introduce the item and the head of finance, Gareth Evans, will present the report. So, Councillor Charlotte.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, the bore da, pawb. I'd like to start by thanking our officers for what is a really detailed report. It's 201 pages. A lot of work's gone into this, and also the working group chaired by Councillor Andrews for the due consideration they've given. Housing is a UK-wide issue. A shortage of housing is a UK-wide issue. There's been a huge lack of investment. We can build houses, but we need to have the funding in order to build those houses. And that's just not happened over the last 14, 15 years. It's a particular problem for us in Conway, given our geography. A third of our county in the west is in the national park. In the east, Howe and Kimnell Bay, we're in a floodplain, so we're constrained there. And we have a very limited narrow coastal strip where we can build houses, but as was members will know, that it often puts considerable strain on our additional services, on our roads, on our transport, on our medical services. So it remains challenging, but clearly that is the solution, is to have more houses. Where there is a lackage, then it's absolutely clear to me that we have to maximise the existing stock that we've got. I think everyone agrees that empty houses is a particularly egregious waste of a resource. There's not really a good valid reason for having an empty house left unoccupied for a considerable period of time. I think all members will agree that the policy of putting a punitive premium on that has worked and will continue to work, and that ability to ramp it up after 5 years, I think, is important. Second homes, as our speaker has eloquently said, they are a slightly different issue in that there are a variety of reasons why people will have a second home. For some, there are care and duties. For some, it is purely a holiday home. So I do think we need to give that some serious consideration. Just because we can raise the tax doesn't mean to say we should do it. We need to be very thoughtful about unintended consequences. I personally feel what we have is working really well at the moment. I think it's bringing money in which goes towards the ever expanding cost of looking after our homelessness. Now, I appreciate members may well have a different point of view of that, but I know we'll have a really good discussion about it, and we'll try and come to a situation which is fair and reflects the needs of not just our homeless people, but other people who'll be impacted by an additional premium, Chair. So I absolutely support the concept. I think it's just deciding what the right amount is something that members will need to consider very carefully. I think Councillor Andrews, Chair, wanted to come in, if that's okay.
Oh, well, if you want to come in quickly now before Gareth goes into the report, Councillor Andrew. You're on mute. Still on mute. Still. Okay, well, shall we let Gareth introduce the report first? Then if you can sort that out, Councillor Andrew, then come in after. Gareth, if you'd like to take us through the report. Thank you.
Diolch, Chair. Bore pawb. So this report provides information to help members determine the council tax premium levels for 25-26, and also to propose the premium levels for 2026-27. And as has been said, follows a review by the Affordable Housing Council Tax Premium Working Group. So the report details the background and considerations for council tax premiums, including the policy intention of bringing long-term empty properties back into use, increase the supply of affordable housing, enhance the sustainability of local communities, using any additional revenue raised to support the housing budget. Members today are required to scrutinise recommendations proposed by the working group and make recommendations to Cabinet before a decision is made by Council next week. So to recap, in October last year, Council decided to charge a 100% premium for both second homes and long-term empty homes from the 1st of April 2024. Council also recommended an indicative 200% premium for 2025-26 for both property types, and proposed a 300% premium for long-term empty properties where they've been empty for over 5 years. And that was effective from the 1st of April 2025. Pending the review, which is essentially what we're doing now. This is the process that we're in with the working group and now going through democracy. Just to be clear, members are able to set a premium at any level up to those amounts. The working group met last month to discuss and review the levels of premium, and there was some really good, detailed, lengthy discussion with a range of views that were expressed in that meeting. The outcome of the meeting was the working group made the following proposals for consideration by this committee today. I appreciate this does have the potential to get a bit confusing, so we'll try and take it slowly and clearly. So the first proposal was to charge a 150% premium for second homes from the 1st of April 25, so not the 200% indicative premium proposed by Council last year. They also recommended charging a 200% premium for long-term empty homes that have been empty for up to 5 years, again from the 1st of April 25, but to charge a 300% premium for long-term empty homes that have been empty for more than 5 years from the 1st of April 25. And just to give some context there, there's over 200 properties that would fall into that category at the moment. Finally, the working group proposed to set an indicative level of premium on both categories of 200% from the 1st of April 26, with an increased premium of 300% for the long-term empty properties, empty for 4 years or more, again subject to review during the next financial year. I think it might be helpful for members if I set out what these proposals actually mean in monetary terms based on a current year standard council tax liability on an average Band D property. So a dwelling with no premium is currently liable for £2,135 in council tax. A dwelling that is charged the current 100% premium is liable for £4,270. And based on the recommendations of the working group, council tax on a second home with a 150% premium applied would be liable for £5,338. Council tax on a long-term empty property with a 200% premium would be liable for £6,405. And council tax on a long-term empty property empty for 5 years or more with a 300% premium would be liable for £8,540. As has been mentioned, the report also notes some potential negative consequences, such as avoidance, additional administrative responsibilities, a number of financial risks, which, whilst illustrative in the report and very difficult really to predict with any certainty, should still be considered very carefully. A public consultation exercise was undertaken over the summer and received 691 responses, which was nearly double the number of responses from the previous year. And the consultation covered views on the appropriate level of premium, potential impacts on affordable housing, tourism, the economy, and the Welsh language. Whilst there was broad support in increasing the premium on long-term empty properties to 200%, that wasn't the case with the second homes, where the majority of those that responded were not in favour of increasing the premium to 200%. The report includes financial estimates and assumptions and considerations, noting that the 100% premium on long-term empty homes and second homes is estimated to generate around £4 million 24-25. It also highlights the need for careful consideration of the financial consequences and the significant resources required to manage the increased volume and complexity of correspondence related to the premium, should the premium increase further. To date, no additional resource has been allocated to the council tax team, but the workload is significant and has been absorbed within the team. That's not a sustainable position going forward should any further premium increase be applied, and it was pleasing to me that the working group acknowledged that budget for an additional officer should be allocated out of any additional premium income to support the administration. So finally, just to reiterate, Chair, the recommendation for today is to consider the proposals made by the working group and make recommendations for consideration by Cabinet on the level of premiums on both property types for from April 2025 and propose an indicative premium for 26-27 subject to review during the next financial year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Carol. Councillor Andrew, have you sorted your techie hitches up there?
I shall be having with IT because while the report was open, I couldn't take it off mute for some reason, yeah?
Ooh.
And I couldn't even transfer my report to my other PC, which, so then I was going a bit blind, but I can do most of this by memory, so I'm just going to speak to you as we go along. I'll just say thank you to members and the public that are listening to this. It's a very, very complex debate, and obviously the reports are there for everybody to scrutinise. Thank you to Gareth and Charlie. You can see in, and I'm going to go through this item 3.10. I think that's on page 68, but the premiums were intended to do the following, and there's 4 items listed there, but to bring long-term empties back into use, to stop the ongoing purchase of second homes, that housing stock, and also to, the premium to be ring-fenced towards housing. I listened to the avoidance. They were talking about avoidance measures. Gareth didn't mention, but for this year, for the first time ever, we've had houses come from business rates, NNDR, back into council tax because they've actually can't meet the criteria the Welsh Government set with the 240 odd days of renting. If you look at table 1, which Gareth alluded to, the additional premium, and then you consider our housing costs, which have gone from 400,000 to nearly 6 million a year, you can see that this premium is needed. This premium is ring fenced and it's used for housing needs. It's as simple as that. In the key consultants and the consultancy, 691 responses, 63% quite happy for long-term empties to be 200% going and 300% after 5 years. Not a surprise that a lot of people that have got second homes that answered this consultation, only a third agreed. But a third's quite a big figure for people who've got second homes. Agree at 200%. Now that was 200% was a recommendation set by this council in this chamber in October last year. You'll see by the recommendations that we're not suggesting that, but we'll go into that later on. If I go back to some rural facts, there are 601 long-term empties. Nearly a third of those are over 5 years old. I know one in Abergele, it's over 17 years empty. So, and there's 1,544 second homes that are empty. That's a lot of housing stock combined. Over 2,000 houses either empty or hardly occupied. The figures that showed from the tourism figures, which Gareth alluded to, show there's been no impact on this premium, how can I say, the premium strategy we've taken. We're bouncing back from COVID. We're employing more people in the hospitality, and I welcome that. When it comes to the properties, our working group is made up of members from the rural areas and the main areas of the main towns and conurbations on the coast. But what came strikingly, and you have this table, which is, I'll hold it up there, but there is a table there in there, and it details everything. And when you look at it, the cheaper properties of the ABC, the cheaper, or the properties which are probably most affordable to some of our residents, for ABC, 48%. If you add in D there, you know, 70%. Now, that's the properties that are empty or second homes. So in the rural areas, for instance, and I remember a rural member saying, you're talking 30% of the homes are either empty or second homes. Brongarmon, 10%. Capel Currig, over 20%. Dowdalen, over 10%. Ysbyty Ifan, over 10%. You know, and to put it in perspective where we live, you're looking at Conway has 329, Conway Town has 329 second-hand or long-term empty around that area. Looking at Llandudno, there's 531 second homes or long-term empty. And this premium strategy is to try and bring some of these back in. The ones that aren't used need to be brought back in. There are grants available, as Gareth may have alluded to bring long-time empties back in, favourable rate. And people have got second homes, and I've talked to people. I asked them, why do they not rent them? So they can, if they want to keep the houses, why do they not rent them? So people have the ability to have a rent and support the local industry as bed and breakfast hotels. But most people want to keep their houses. So we're lucky that the properties going to NNDR have reduced and stopped and reversing now. So was a negative, which is slightly positive. Now, getting to the recommendations, the group have been meeting for 5 years now. We've seen that the premium going up by 25%, 50% has worked. And we talked about the losing of the revenue, but looking at the strategy, as I said before, it's working. I'm going to sum up now. But last October, as I said, council voted for 200%. If you look at the recommendations on page, and I'm flicking back here because, as I say, 68, the recommendations are 2.42, 2.4, 2.43, 2.44, 2.45, and 2.46 is administration costs. I would like our members in the Finance Committee to support all those. It's been done on a proper deliberation basis with officers, with the leader, with the public, with consultation, and I recommend these to this committee. I'd also like to thank Mr. Wood for coming in and talking to us, and I've also talked to him on the phone. And I'd like to thank all our officers, especially Susan, Gareth, Jason, Judith, and all the other members of my committee and my vice chair. I'll sum up what my vice said. He's not in. He doesn't support the need for second homes. And the one thing that is stuck in my mind, he said that some people haven't got first homes, never mind second homes. So at that point, I shall go take it back to you, Chair. But all those recommendations I propose, please. Yeah.
So that's your proposal. Thank you,
Yeah.
Councillor Andrew. Deal. Okay, members. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Andrew, for quoting me there. You're absolutely right. I've been Andrew's vice chair on this committee for the last 6 years, I think. And prior to that, I've been on this committee since it was created back in 2017. I think we, as a committee, have been extremely cautious in the way we've approached this. For several years, we haven't increased things. We've looked at it and we've moved it. We've changed the supplements as we have considered they should be. We looked at the if we look at the number of empty homes, and the number of long-term empties, and we consider the number of households in Conway that are without a home, living in temporary accommodation, it's not much of a difference. There's almost exactly the same number of people living in temporary accommodation, households living in temporary accommodation, as live in second homes and empty homes, which is something we should be. Now, officers are quite right. For the first time since since we've had the ability to introduce a premium, we have this year seen some properties coming back into council tax, and that should be applauded. That's ultimately what we need as an authority. We have a duty to the people who live in our county, in my view, and you choose to live here all year round. And unfortunately, we can't demand that private developers build band A, B, and C houses, and very often they don't. There's lots of band D, E, and F houses going up, but very few A, B, and C. Equally, the housing associations haven't delivered to the levels that we would like them to do. And so every year we see our homelessness budget increasing. If we go back to 2017, I think the homelessness budget was around £470,000. Was it last year? 6 million? And that is council taxpayers are paying that. And you and I are paying that. The regular council taxpayers are having to pay that extra in their council tax to subsidise the fact that we are having to support people to live in temporary accommodation because they haven't got a first home. And I personally struggle with that. I really do struggle with that. Our responsibility is to ensure that people have a home. First and foremost, it is the most important thing in our residents' life to have a roof over their head. And so many don't have a permanent roof over their head. They often think they've got a place. They think, great, we're moving now, we're going to, and suddenly they're no longer top of the list, or they've changed and their circumstances change slightly, and suddenly they're waiting again. So for me, I agree 100% with what Councillor Andrews said. Last year, this council said 200%. We, as a committee, said, no, that's too much. This is starting to work. But what we don't want to do is back off and then see that that doesn't continue. The policy is starting to work. Let's support it to work. And let's ensure that we provide Conway residents with a roof over their head. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chris.
A second Councillor Andrews' proposals.
I was going to ask you. So, the second Councillor Andrew. Okay, have we got anyone else? Councillor David next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a lot of sympathy with Mr. Wood and what he had to say, and I think perhaps his family does need help, and maybe that help should be done by social service to work with them. But you know, my sympathy is also of the people that haven't got homes in this county, and there's far too many of them. And I think really having all these empty homes when we have such a problem with homelessness, I think we have to address it. I think we have done. I'm disappointed that 200% is not going from next year. It's going to be 150%. But I think we've seen it. This is working. I think and like Councillor Chris said, we have been cautious, maybe too cautious. So we need to move on that. So they're my thoughts really. That yeah, I've got a lot of sympathy with Mr. Wood and people with individual circumstances, but I've got sympathy with the people that have. It's the worst thing not to have a home. It's the worst thing for people, you know, and I think we need to get our residents into accommodation, particularly in the rural areas where there's too many empty homes in the rural areas and people are having to move away that, you know, that are not able to live with the families and live in the areas where they were brought up because the homes have been taken over by second homes. So I think the actions we are taking is cautious, and I think we need to carry on moving on that. But as I reiterate again, I do have sympathy with Mr. Wood, and there are individual circumstances and we can look into them. But this policy is absolutely right and it's going in the right direction. One final thing I would like to say is that there are many of us that stood on a manifesto to build council houses, and you know, and really, there are people in the administration now. They haven't gone forward with that, you know, and that is another problem. But you know, the main thing is this is the right policy. We need to persevere with it. Thank you.
Councillor David. Next, we've got Councillor Sharon, then Councillor Gareth.
Sorry. It's been that long since we had a meeting, I've forgotten how to use it. This is something that has been raised at one of my surgeries. It's from a couple who are from the Conway Valley. They have lived away from the Conway Valley for some years, and they have now purchased a house in my ward, which they are very anxious to move back to make their contribution to the community where one of them certainly was brought up. They're unable to sell their house in Yorkshire. Despite reducing the price, having it featured on Rightmove, Goodmove, and lots of other moves that they've mentioned to me that I've never heard of, the house is stuck. At the moment, they are classed as having a second home, although I guess it could be classed as an empty home, but that is something that is beyond their control. Now, they've gone through the documents, and I've read through the documents as well. And my question is there a discretionary exemption for people in their situation where possibly they pay the premium initially, but when their house is eventually sold, obviously they will be able to evidence that they were quite aggressively marketing that property. Is there the opportunity to make a claim retrospectively for the premium to be returned? They're very anxious to move to this area. They obviously have really stretched their finances, not unwittingly, but believing that the home they live in now would sell quite quickly, and that hasn't happened. There are provisions in there in the documents, if someone is selling their second home, then they're exempt, but it doesn't mention somebody in this couple's particular circumstance who are trying to sell another home to move to the home they want to live in. They can't move. One of them can't move, I guess. If one of them moved and one of them didn't, that would be but they can't, because one does need some support, and the other thing is they only have one set of everything, so they don't have two lots of fridges and two lots of beds and two lots of sofas. They have one set that they want to move to the home in Llansanfraid. I'm sorry if I've rambled, and I hope you got the gist of it.
We got the gist. Thank you. Gareth? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. There's a number of exceptions they're called as to, and you've referred to one of them in terms of a house being marketed would would lose the premium, if you like. They wouldn't be charged for a period of 12 months. And that's applicable once. So if the house doesn't sell, the premium would then be reapplied and couldn't be applied again. There isn't, unfortunately, anything that covers the scenario that you've described there within the legislation. So there are no, and I guess to introduce that level of discretion, if you like, talked earlier about the administrative burden that there already is, and having that consistency will be very difficult, and obviously it would create an awful lot of work in trying to accommodate something like that. So the short answer, I'm sorry, is no, not in that situation.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the discretionary. Is there any way that would be included? Because this is only going to happen, I would say, to no more than a handful of people. Is there any discretionary powers for people such as this that can be included? Probably it's such an anomaly it hadn't even been considered. But I would ask you to consider it, because I don't think there will be more than a handful of people that this particular situation is going to apply to. Thank you.
Okay, there is not as part of the premiums legislation, but there is under section 13A, I think it is, looking at Syria, of the relevant legislation. There is, we have the power to apply some discretionary relief. Generally, the legislation was written for circumstances where a property had been flooded, for example, and couldn't be occupied for a period. So in circumstances like that, it tends to be the case. What we would do is certainly consider, based on the individual merits of any case like you're describing, and the way that we operate that within the authority is discussed with the cabinet member, and the cabinet member will ultimately make the decision. I think what is important to say with that is any, because that's built into the tax base potentially, any council tax that is waived, if you like, as a result of someone's circumstances would be absorbed by the rest of the residents within the county ultimately. So it's something that isn't frequently awarded, but we can look at, we have the power to look at that kind of thing.
There you are, Councillor Sharon. Next, we've got Councillor Gareth and Councillors Harry, Hall and Andrews.
Thank you. I think in this proposal, I think there are three distinct areas, and we mustn't confuse those areas. We've got the danger that houses move across to classify themselves as business and try and pay business rates. And if that's happening, again, we should absolutely, as a council, make sure that they are actually got commercial waste bins and all those additional costs, so they're not actually put in the public bins. And, personally, I think there should be regulation of Airbnb properties so that we're actually regulating that side of things. The other area are the empty homes. And I've got absolutely no issue. It's completely wrong that homes remain empty and that we've got so many empty homes, and we should do everything we possibly can to get those homes back into use. We've got grants, but it just doesn't make any sense that we've got long-term empty homes, and we should really be doing everything we can. So no issues with the premium on that. On the second home issues, it does seem to be working from some of the stats, but what I can't see from the stats are what is happening, who's actually purchasing those properties. Now, if they're economically active individuals and families and people from Conwy, then yes, it is helping us and it is making a difference. If it's what it's doing is actually widening and making it more affordable for people to move into the area to retire, then I would say that's actually the law of unintended consequences, because what it's going to do is sooner or later put a strain on social services and our budgets there. So, I can't actually make a decision on those second homes as to whether it's right to increase the premium until I know that they're actually being sold and being used by the right people. Otherwise, we could be actually storing ourselves a problem and making it more affordable to get retired people in and economically and inactive people in. Now, they're very welcome, but we should not be taking steps to make it easier and make it more economically beneficial for them to actually move in. So, you know, until we've got that data and we have a better understanding as to who's purchasing these properties and are they being purchased by the people that we want to purchase, and we're helping the people that we want to purchase, I'd like to propose that we hold the premiums as they are, because, you know, I know it's individual circumstances with Mr. Wood who spoke, but, you know, if he had to sell that property, and it's not directly linked to what I was saying, then there would be a greater strain on social services and it would actually cost us more money. So we really, really need to understand the effects that it's having. And I'd like to see more information on it rather than just the numbers coming back onto the market. Are we actually achieving exactly what we want to achieve? So as I said, I'd like to propose that we hold the second homes premium at that 100% mark.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. Are you proposing an amendment?
I'd
then
like to
this?
propose an amendment to that.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? But we've got Gareth. The other Gareth is going to come back to you in a minute. So if Gareth, you'd like to come back.
Yeah, no, just very quickly. Obviously, we don't have any control over who ultimately buys a property, and we don't have that data in terms of when somebody becomes liable for council tax. We don't have their age because it's not something we need to collect. So I hear the point you're making, but it's very difficult for us to draw any conclusions from that because we just don't have that data available. I guess another point that I wanted to make is yes, the numbers are coming down, and you know, from the 1st of April we've seen a decline in both long-term empties and second homes. That decline is where the premium is being applied. Doesn't necessarily correlate with properties being sold and properties becoming available or now occupied. It might just be that they're on the market for sale or for let and the premium has been taken off. So I thought that was an important distinction to make. It's, yes, they're going down, but it's not a case of, well, they've gone down by 200, now we've got 200 more houses that are occupied. It doesn't work quite like that. So I guess over time we will start to see and have a clearer picture.
Yeah, and that was my point. As somebody said, you know, it's a blunt instrument. So before we we ratchet it up, I think we should be trying to make sure that we're achieving what we want to achieve and that we're helping the people that we really, really want to help. Because I think everybody wants the same result. It's just being absolutely certain that we're achieving what we want to achieve. So I think we should pause it. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Councillor Harry next. Oh, yes. Would anyone like to second the amendment by Councillor Gareth? No. Okay. We'll go back now to Councillor Harry.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. I'll start with the first one. So, Gareth, in your presentation, you touched on the administrative burden. Now, I think we all know that the premiums generate really welcome additional resource in terms of helping to address some of the challenges we have with housing locally. To my mind, if we are going to levy the premium at whatever level, addressing those challenges within the local housing market has to be the priority. And over the years, I've heard suggestions within this council that perhaps the additional income generated should be used for other purposes. On that vein, I wanted to pick up around this bit about additional resource for administration. Now, you said that you haven't received any so far. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There was a business case submitted last year as part of the budget setting process, but it fell into the category of non-essential.
I thought that was the case. There's a bit of confusion in my mind because the papers that came to us as councillors when we set the budget still included that revenue business case, but trawling back through the minutes, it does say that avoidable business cases were dropped out. I think around £1 million plus. So I assumed that may have been one of them. But look, thank you for clarifying that. So if we come to the report we've got in front of us today, you've got paragraph 321 where you're requesting additional resource, £50,000 per annum specifically. So I'm assuming that's effectively a repeat of that previous business case. Yep.
Essentially, yeah. Just to give some context
Yeah.
there, I think over the past 12 months we've had pushing 500 pieces of correspondence, and that's can range from responding to a letter from a member of the Senate, a member of the public, somebody affected, but it can also be going to a tribunal and preparing for a tribunal. Well, obviously you've got to do that properly. It takes up time, and it takes up the time of senior officers like the gentleman sat next to me. My concern with that is that in doing that and preparing for those kind of important meetings, there's a risk that you detract from the core business, which is collecting council tax and maintaining that collection rate. So I guess my concern is we end up shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't resource it properly.
Yeah, I recognise that. I think with the greatest of respect, when we first looked at charging these premiums, that risk was always made clear. So I'm unsure why that should come as a surprise now, come as a specific issue. My concern is this report today and the recommendations, you're asking us to commit to that additional resource today. That's really clear in the recommendations. Now, last year, in light of the financial shortfall faced by the councillors decided that we shouldn't commit to that at that stage. What I'm concerned about, we're facing, I think it's a shortfall in excess of £20 million for next year. Good, that is correct. I lose track of the figures from time to time. So I'm a little bit concerned that, and forgive my turn of phrase here, that we're jumping the gun in committing to this. We have yet again another unprecedented financial challenge ahead of us, and we are committing to this expenditure now without looking at all the other business cases that will come forward. Now, I understand £50,000 probably sounds like a small amount of money in terms of council's expenditure, but when we look at some of the decisions we've had to make in terms of budget reductions, £50,000 that would have covered, or that could cover, no changes to weed killing on roads, that could have covered no changes to grass cutting in public open spaces. So personally, and I understand the challenges, but I have a real problem with us committing today to saying that we will agree to that additional resource going in. Don't know if you've got any observations, comments.
Yeah, in terms of it's not a case of not seeing it coming. I think what we've seen is since the significant increase to 100% in the premium, it's practically doubled in terms of the volume. So it wasn't a case of we haven't seen it, but obviously until you make decisions as members to increase the premium and effectively ramp it up as has happened recently, going from 25 to 100% in a relatively short space of time, you don't really know what level of response you're going to get in terms of the work that entails. But again, I go back to the original point. Well, 2 points actually. One is if the request is on the basis of a further increase of the premium, and it's to be funded out of the additional premium income that will be generated. If we don't do it, in my view, I suspect we'll likely lose more than that from council tax that we don't end up collecting, because we're diverting existing resources away. Jason I might pull you in, Jason, here actually to give a bit of a feel for the volume of work that is undertaken from somebody who is effectively a council tax team leader trying to direct and maximise the recovery and maintain the collection rate that we have. If that resource is effectively diverted away full time essentially to deal with other stuff, then at 0.1% of council tax is £78,000. So very, very quickly we end up shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of our collection rate.
Yeah, just to add to what Gareth said there, and in the report, we've seen a significant increase in the volume of correspondence, telephone calls. We're dealing with people who understandably will look to avoid paying the premium. Valuation tribunals, which I attend, have increased. Also, we're trying to work with being proactive in actually identifying other second homes or long-term empties where we're not actually charging a premium, which would increase the income coming into the authority as well. So there's a whole host there of administrative burden on the team, which, as Gareth has alluded to, does direct staff to those impacting on the day-to-day collection of council tax as well.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks. And obviously we're making recommendations today to to cabinet. As you know. Right, next we have Councillor Paul.
Yes, I was going to ask two questions. One was in relation to what Harry's raised, the paragraph 3.21. From a slightly different perspective, I was concerned we were taking 50,000 out of the ring fence money for housing, because even 50,000 could be used for doing up one of these properties, which we're presently doing up for people in emergency and temporary accommodation. So that was where I was coming at that from. I was also concerned that the actual business case wasn't in this paragraph, because in a sense we are jumping the budget process and we're saying this is a big priority to spend this, allocate this 50,000. Now, I think if I went to any department in this authority, people would argue with me that they also had equally pressing business cases, because they're having to direct staff from other jobs, which are still important, to do slightly more prioritized jobs at the moment, or as a consequence of critical incidents or whatever. So I think that is an important principle and issue we've got to tackle. If we're making business cases during the year and allocating money in the year, especially with the level of our overspend on at the moment, I think in the public interest, that more detailed information should be in these reports. So I'm not saying I don't agree to this 50,000 being used, the arguments being pursued, but I think in the public interest, the public need to know when we're making these decisions and why. And in this case, as I understand it, it's to employ one more member of staff. I think Andrew Wood referred to that, and presumably the on costs of employing that member of staff. So what I'm trying to establish here is that particular principle, that if we are allocating in this year with so much overspending already taking place, we need those business cases within reports when they come to scrutiny. Whereas in this report, it was thin. Paragraph 3.21 is thin. So I don't need a response from that, but I hope Gareth and Amanda and Charlie will take that on board going forward. Now, the second point I wanted to raise, and this came to me really when looking at the table, which Andrew Wood again referred to, on the numbers and the numbers paying second home premiums, the numbers paying long-term empty premiums in each of the communities in Conway. Now, again, my view is that information we should actively put into the public domain through our communications strategy. Now, in Gwynedd, fair play to them, they have done that. They've put that detailed information into the public domain, to be honest, with even more drilling down on the data, which was being requested here. So that information, again, in the public interest, is in the public domain. And very interestingly, and you probably saw on social media, or if you read the Daily Post newspaper, there was a very good, I thought, long article, balanced article on that was looking at Barmouth and looking at the different arguments in that particular community from their council tax premiums increase. Because I think at the end of the day, if this policy is going to be sustainable, and I'm supportive of the policy, my concern again in Conway is we need to be much more active in communicating the detail for the public interest and explaining what is going on. Because I think the frustration we get coming back to us as councillors is we're not putting that information into the public domain. And I would appeal to Charlie to ensure that, okay, might say, well, they might not publish it. I'm pretty sure the Daily Post or some of the online media people would pick up this story if they could see the hard data. And certainly we've got the example in Gwynedd. This information was published and it was in the media, and I think it was helpful to this particular debate. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Paul. We've got Councillor Andrew online. That's the last.
Can I just we'll get a response to Charlie. Will you put this?
Okie doke.
I think we can always do better with communication, Paul. I'm slightly, this is in the public domain. It's an unredacted document. We made a point of doing that. It's there on the websites. The local democracy reporter attends these meetings. They used to attend in person. They don't now. That's where they get their information from. We do a lot of press releases, and they don't get picked up. So yeah, we can continue to try. I can bring it up with the communications group and see if there's a way we can get that under people's noses, but it is in the public domain. It is there on the website, and that's where the local democracy reporter knows to look for anything that's coming up, and they obviously will watch this meeting and take an opinion on it from there.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. Okay, Councillor Andrew, last speaker.
Leader gets to jump on me, yeah? Gets to come on me. Just a couple.
Perks, yeah.
Yeah, no, well, just a couple of comments, just for all the members and all the public out there watching this broadcast. Welsh Government set this criteria. It's contained in the report, and we work around the criteria. So just to set that forwards. Going about, I just want to mention about the rural areas. I really do believe in ABC rural areas and the ones that have obviously got high second homes and long-term empties. If a family moved into one of those ABCs, with a couple of kids, there's another £4,000 towards the local school. Okay. Going back to what Gareth said, we've got two Gareths, but I'll go back to Officer Gareth. Yeah, and what Sharon outlined as a case, as an example, yeah, if they don't pay that council tax, we'd have to pay it. Conway residents would have to pay it because it's on the council base. So that would not be fair. I can't understand why people who've got second homes are not using them much or can't use them at the moment. Why they can't do a short-term rent on it? It's as simple as that. Lots of people do that. I've done that. And talking to Councillor Gareth, we've only built 99 houses last year, and I understand that. I do share the feeling of where these people come from, they're buying the houses, but that's the fluid market. That's a market that goes backwards and forwards. It's a market we can't control. It's very hard to measure. But the way things are going at the moment with the long-term empties, and second homes, a couple hundred coming back in. So add to that 99 built and a couple hundred coming back in, maybe used. That's 300. We're getting somewhere there. Regulatory Airbnb, I know we're looking at that. And lastly, I'd just like to really support the administration costs. Like anything, if you actually have an officer that can actually go out and engage and find out which are long-term empty. I'll give you an example before of one in Abigail for 17 years. They can go and check it, and then they can go and apply the premium, and they'll actually self-generate that money. So I would have added one officer could generate maybe £500,000 possibly. That's not unfeasible because there is a massive amount of stuff that we don't know about happening out there. And to the people who are paying the premium, thank you, and are conforming. There's a lot of people out there that are cheating the system, and we need to get a grip of that. And without administration and without having extra cost, we can't do that. So we did listen to you, Gareth. When I say Councillor Gareth, we did say that you recommended, or the whole, sorry, not you, but the council recommended 200%. We've taken it down to 150%. And I would go with all the recommendations which we mentioned before on page 68. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me speak. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Harry, did you want to just pop in there?
Yeah, just really quickly, because conscious. Andrew's comments are made in his role as the chair of the working group that's done a lot of research into this. I thought the comments about an additional extra officer could bring in an extra £500,000 of revenue. That's obviously a significant figure. Now, forgive me if I've missed that in the report, but whereabouts is that referenced?
It's not referenced in the report.
Okay, so where's that figure come from?
Well, you need to ask Councillor Andrew.
Okay, but Councillor Andrew does chair the working group that you support. Now, look, I can put Andrew on the spot, but
you know,
Yes,
giving
he's
Andrew benefit.
always keen to be put on the spot, Councillor Harry.
Yeah, but
Councillor Andrew, can you answer
Well
that?
done.
Okay, so the premium's £5,000, okay, which with those figures have come up before, and you've got 2,000 houses that are long-term empty or second homes, and you identify maybe 100 more or 100 that should do. That will give you roughly £5,000 each and £500,000 worth of income. That's only 100 houses, which should be 5%. Now, I'm sorry to bring a figure that is in the report, but that is not beyond wild expectations of quite easily looking at this. Don't forget, we haven't got the resources to go out and check on these things. It's currently wrapped up with communications, with tribunals and so on and so forth. So this will make a huge impact. Not only that, it'll also make an impact and people actually think about bringing their stuff back in from the non-rated thing back into normal rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Oh, Amanda, did you want to pop in?
Yeah, just to support, whilst I appreciate Councillor Andrews just made an estimate there of potential income, I guess I do want to just stress, I guess, the different factors that would form in it. And I think Gareth already has referenced that a 0.1% collection rate is about 78,000, and I think a couple of things really is, there are various strands of activity that the team are working on, which have the concern, which have the benefit of us in terms of income. So one obviously is the fact that we don't want our collection rate to drop away in any way, shape or form, and obviously the danger and the concern, I guess, is that by ramping the premium up quite significantly will lead to a significant uptick in the level of correspondence that we're dealing with, and we've already seen that in terms of the change to 100% in the past year. So obviously there's a resource issue in terms of managing and dealing with all of that correspondence, and I just know from my own personal experience in the last year that I've had to respond and write letters to a number of second home and empty home owners, and I'm only dealing with a very, 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 very small tip of the iceberg in terms of that. Clearly the team are dealing with the bulk of that. So there is a real issue that our collection will slip away because the resources are being taken dealing with correspondence on premiums. But the second and important point, that Councillor Andrew has just referenced there, is the fact we do need, and we are continuing to do work to ensure that we are making sure that everybody, in terms of second person discounts, that people are only entitled, those who are only entitled to that get that, to make sure that that's up to date, to ensure and identify second homes and empty homes that maybe are under the radar at the moment, and bringing those into play, as it were. So I think we will never be able to quantify, because there's an opportunity cost with some of this. We'll never be able to quantify what the additional resource has or hasn't generated in that sense. But all I guess we can serve to allay to members is the concerns about loss of income, and the collection of the £1 million that the report references anyway in terms of the premium income. And obviously if there's inadequate resource within the team, then there is a real danger we will see a depletion in our general collection, which will have far more detrimental financial consequences to the authority. And I think that's the point, I guess, that both Gareth's tried to make and Councillor Andrew is making as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Amanda. Okay, well, before we go to the vote, just to say again, it's been, that's been a really good debate, and I'd obviously like to draw Councillor Charlie and Councillor Emily's attention to the comments today about the issues of their B&Bs. Oh, so, Councillor David.
Just a quick point on the 50,000. If the staff are doing extra work, we need more staff to pursue this policy, then I think really that's a no-brainer that we need to do it. And just one last point to be mindful. We're talking about empty homes. Some homes are empty all the year round. People buy homes, put the money in property as an investment, because obviously property prices go up. It's not as good as investment if you've got rising council tax premiums every year. So I think be mindful of that people are buying these. Some of the homes are by people that don't even use them as holiday homes. They buy them as an investment, and we do need to sort of make sure that that doesn't happen. De-incentivise that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Yes, saying that we take on board the issues that have been raised about Airbnbs, and also another issue that's particularly prevalent in my ward is the registered social landlords holding empty properties for a really long time. That causes great angst amongst people waiting on the waiting list for social housing. So, you know, those are two areas that I'd really appreciate if we could chase up on that, please. So going to the vote, Councillor Gareth's amendment didn't get a seconder. So we're now going to the recommendations under 2.1, 2.4, 2.41, 42, 43, 44, 45 and 46. We're happy to take those, to vote on those now. We've had a proposer and we've had a seconder. So if members would like to show in favour of those recommendations. Four in the room and 4 online. Those against, please. Against 1. Abstentions 1. No. So that's been carried. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Mr. Wood indeed for taking the time to come and talk to us. Thank you very much indeed, Dale. Can we recall all? Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Do we call them back, Chair? Because we've got the next report is going to be maybe affect them as well.
Yeah. Hopefully they will pop back in now. If member services. So.
No, what I'm saying is the next report is on about is it 25, 26, 26, 27 premiums?
So that's the appendix.
Okay, all right, fine. As long as it doesn't affect us. Right.
Yeah, it looks as though it is another report, but that was just an appendix to it. We're going on to item 12, the performance self-assessment 2023 to 2024. Have we got? Oh yes, Councillor Sean is back. Is Councillor Sue back? Let's have a look online. Councillor Abdul, you're back. Wonderful. Councillor Anne. Okay, so that's everybody's back in. We're now moving on to item 12, so the performance self-assessment, pages 269 to 391. Councillor Chris Cade, the Cabinet Member for Audit Policy and Performance, is going to introduce the report, and Yola McGregor, Strategy, Performance and Engagement Manager, is going to present the report. So welcome both.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's performance self-assessment for 2023-2024, as you will see, is a large piece of work, and it provides an end-of-year analysis of progress and challenges based on our corporate plan priorities. That's the 9 citizen-focused outcomes and the 7 governance areas. Chair, this is a statutory requirement under the Local Government Election Wales Act 2021, and it satisfies our reporting requirements under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act as well. We need to ensure transparency and optimal accessibility. The report has already been to Governance and Audit last week, and it goes to Cabinet tomorrow, and then it goes on to full council. So it has quite a long journey, but it's important that it comes to overview and scrutiny. Just to say, I welcome the new format of the report and the appendices, particularly the links to meetings, reports, press releases, etc., plus the decisions taken at Cabinet, Governance and Audit, and Overview and Scrutiny. All those links are there. Yola McGregor, our Strategy Performance Engagement Manager, will take over from me, but I just want to repeat a couple of commitments that were made at Governance and Audit last week. One is that we aim to present a climate, in this climate of negative financial pressures and diminishing resources, we want to do more benchmarking regarding value for money. And we also intend to tighten the time lag. This report in front of you this morning takes us to March 2024. So Yolo and his team will be starting work on the April to September 24 self-assessment report imminently. So with that, I'll hand over to Yolo.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Welcome, Yolo.
Thank you. And as usual, when I follow the lead member, he's stolen all the best bits of my speech. First of all, I just wanted to say a word of introduction. Hello, I'm Yola. I am the new Strategy and Performance Engagement Manager following Amanda Jones. I started in June. I'm slowly getting around to meeting all the new faces. I think there are 1 or 2 people I've not yet met in this committee, so just a word of hello. As Councillor Cater said, this is a statutory report and hopefully one that the committee is familiar with. It does have a new look. I've brought with my appointment, hopefully a fresh pair of eyes to the production of the report. Structured around the 9 citizen-focused outcomes, and within the 9th one, you'll see that we now include the governance areas, the 7 governance areas that we're encouraged to look at under the Wellbeing of Future Generations statutory guidance. Also within those outcomes now, there is a closer focus on items that have been discussed at committee, but also press released items and anything of significance really within the sort of the strategic lens of the council. The report has been to SMT and cabinet members to check it for accuracy, and as Councillor Cater said, to Governance and Audit for assurance around the process, and that we're meeting the legislative requirements under the Local Government and Elections Act. The overall message from the report is that despite very challenging circumstances, the council has continued to deliver very good work in support of all its outcomes. However, there is a very clear message in the report that there is a financial cloud hanging over the authority that threatens future delivery. Next steps, as Councillor Cater said, is to go to Cabinet and Council with this. So for the purposes of this meeting, the recommendations are outlined on page 270 of your packs. But the report really is a tool for scrutiny members to identify performance issues to help inform your forward work plan. It is a tool for that purpose in my eyes. I may not be able to answer all operational level questions that councillors may have. There may be other expertise in the room that can help with those things, but otherwise I'll take any questions away and obviously return with answers when I can. I won't hold the floor any longer because I'm sure members are eager to begin the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolo. I think you underestimate their eagerness, but thank you very much for that report and really welcome. Yes, we welcome you and look forward to many years of you coming and presenting to us here. So, members, questions, comments? Councillor Paul.
Thank you for letting me speak, Chair, as I'm not a member of this committee. I did give Councillor Chris and Yolo a heads up on this point that I was wanted to make today. Yolo rightly says this is a key tool in us as councillors scrutinising performance. And that obviously is in relation both to good performance and achieving our outcomes, and also poor performance where we're not achieving our outcomes. And in my correspondence with Yolo and Chris, in order to drill down of why I think it's an ineffective tool, was I gave him the specific details of our problems with the Youth Justice Service. Because in relation to performance self-assessment reports, the 2022-23 and 2023-24, since I've been a councillor, that poor performance in that area was not highlighted. And if you remember, Chair, because you attended the meeting, the Health and Social Care meeting, when the joint inspection report was discussed, in which I got into a lot of difficulty about because of my challenges. If you remember, the leader, Charlie, and the cabinet member, Liz, said they weren't early sighted on these problems. And if you remember, the key, I took out two key things from the joint inspection report. The first one was the Youth Justice Service was not providing the right services at the right times in an accessible way for children. And secondly, the Youth Justice Service Management Board lacks strategic direction and oversight. Now, in the two previous performance self-assessment reports, those matters, which obviously officers were aware of, and I was sceptical about Liz and Chris's not being cited on these issues, which is what they said at the Health and Social Care, because I, and I'm sure other councillors, had put in my 2 and a bit years, lots of emails about youth justice problems in my area. So my concern is, from that specific detail, is to take it out to the bigger picture. And the bigger picture for me is, in the performance self-assessment report, have we got a grip of those areas where we're not achieving our outcomes, or even worse, where we should be alerting scrutiny to the fact that things are not going well? And my specific example, and I could refer to other examples, but that's the most glaringly obvious, because we had a joint inspection report, which the work was done earlier in the year, and the report came, I think, in May this year. So I accept the May report will be included in the next performance self-assessment report. But my real concern is, if the leader and the cabinet member can say, I wasn't cited on the scale of these issues of performance in the Youth Justice Service, the question is, are they cited on other performance, poor performance, or not achieving outcomes? And are our systems robust enough? So what I want reassurance from Councillor Chris, who's the cabinet member for this area, is, can he assure me that in future, that where we are not performing well, we're on it, and that information is fed to Yolo? It's not any criticism of Yolo, he's only been here since June, but in a sense, I want to be assured that Yolo is getting that information, that early alerts of where things are not going well, so that we can have that scrutinised by myself and other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, I'm surprised that Councillor Paul's come on so strongly about this today, because he actually is one of the best members for attending service performance reviews, and those are very thorough and examine a lot of issues, both the financial aspect and performance and everything, and a lot of things are actually flagged up at that point. So I must admit, we have a very robust governance system in this authority. You know, we're talking about streamlining it a little bit. Chair, you've been involved in discussions about that, workshops and everything, to make scrutiny more efficient, and we've come to some conclusions, haven't we, about that, and that's been to the Democratic Services Committee. So I don't have a problem with this. I wasn't, this particular item that Councillor Paul talks about went to Social Care and Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I wasn't there, so I think I'll pass over to the leader, Charlie, because he was there at that point. What's happened with that? But yes, we have the next round of self-performance coming up. As I mentioned, Yolo will be working on that, and there will be a report that will be included in that piece of work. So sorry to put you on the spot, Charlie, but I wasn't at that Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Yeah, I was in attendance. I think it identified that there was areas that need improvement. I mean, I read that report very different from you, Paul, in so much as it praised the work of the board, but it talked about disjointed partnership working between sort of Pwyllgor, police, Betsy Cadwallader, and there was an improvement plan set out there. In terms of the issues in our ward, we had a multi-agency meeting. You couldn't make it because you had appendicitis, so the meeting. But I attended that meeting. I received assurance from lots of people there that there wasn't an issue. So I don't think it's a question of ignoring the issue. We have audit for a reason, both internal and external, because often I think people actually delivering the service don't know whether it's as good as it should be. If we did everything perfectly, we wouldn't have need for audit. We wouldn't need for scrutiny committees. We wouldn't need for lots of things. So, you know, you don't know what you don't know. I take your point. We need to look to do more to try and identify areas with the weaknesses, and I think scrutiny is a really important role to that. I think you were right to raise it with Olive in terms of what goes into that report next year. So yeah, you know, we can always look to do things better, and we always try to do things better.
Chair, can I come back on that?
Just briefly, Councillor.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, because I do attend the SPRs and I do raise these issues, and I actually raise them endlessly about Youth Justice Service since I was elected, because it's a live issue in my area. And when the joint inspection report, and this is what worries me, the joint inspection report, you may not read it like I do, Charlie, but when a joint inspection report says to this council, the service, the Youth Justice Service, was not providing the right services at the right times in an accessible way for children, that's as damning as you can get for an external audit of what we're doing, calling us to account. Now, I suspected that from my local knowledge, because I was listening to children and parents and other concerned people locally. That was my experience. I was raising that issue, and there was enormous pushback. There was enormous pushback on me for raising those issues. Now, what I want to be clear about is that the performance assessment process acknowledges that, and in this next year, not just on that issue, but on other issues, get a grip, because scrutiny is not just about me scrutinizing things after the event when I get a report. It's about me scrutinizing dynamically in the day-to-day and reporting that in.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. I think Reen wants to come in.
Yeah, I think we need to be very careful here to be quoting parts of reports without putting context. There is a lot more context in that report than those 2 lines, Councillor Paul. And I would invite people to read the report, because as the leader says, there is significant praise in that report to the work of the individual officers who are within that service. We've taken, and I've taken responsibility for elements of the matters that have been raised in that report, and we are working through that. But this isn't an agenda item about this issue. This is about the performance of this local authority generally. I would make the point that we have one of the most robust service performance review procedures that I've seen, to be honest. And all these matters can be raised by individual members in those sessions. They can also, I would contend that we are very accessible as officers in terms of allowing members, you know, we've had quite a lot of meetings, Paul, about different things over the past 2 years. And I would hope that you would consider us to be accessible in that way. But I wouldn't want this session to be just about one single matter.
We
need to discuss the performance of the whole report.
Yeah, thank you, Reen. But I commend Councillor Paul for the way that he takes all this on so personally and looks into it and represents children. So just Councillor Julie, was that just to briefly comment on this, or are you okay now? Reen has answered this issue.
I am to a certain extent, but Reen did touch on what I wanted to say. I think that it's unfortunate that that often we have these discussions and it's not heard by Councillor Paul, that there is an awful lot of great work that goes on. I chaired the multi-agency meeting in that ward. a lot of information that the councillor brings forward is inaccurate or incorrect. And I would just encourage any councillors who receive information around antisocial behaviour or drugs in their ward to contact the police and share that information with the police. Just to say, the Youth Justice Service, yes, may have had some issues in terms of capacity and absence, but actually the work that they do and the officers are absolutely phenomenal. As I have responsibility for the youth service, I see how closely they work together. So I just didn't want it to be that in people's minds they just heard those two negative lines that Councillor Paul has raised. And we're not trying to stifle debate, as you've said, Chair. This is about the overall report, but I just couldn't let that pass without saying that the team do an amazing job with some of our most vulnerable young with some of our most vulnerable young people. It's not appropriate to continually bash a department when actually there's a great deal of good work that goes on. So thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Julie. We'll now move to next speaker is Councillor Harry.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Now we've done with the argument between the two people that aren't members of this committee, I'll make a proposal and hopefully we can move on.
This morning, Councillor Harry.
Well, that's good for you, Chair. Well done. But look, first of all, I'll thank both Chris and Yolo for the report. I think what Yolo said about it being a really useful tool, apologies, is spot on. I've had a look through it, and it's lovely to actually see some things that we've discussed, we've debated in scrutiny here, and actually reflect on the work that has been done. There are things that we can all pick up separately outside of this committee. I know there's certainly one issue I'll be following up with Democratic Services. I can see Sean Williams there, so I'll be pinging you an email soon. But at this stage, look, I'm happy to propose that we recommend that Cabinet recommends approval of the draft report as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. So that's a proposal. Are you seconding there, Councillor Hannah? Yes, after the next speaker. Thank you. So have we got a seconder yet before we move on? Councillor Abdul, you seconded. Lovely, thank you. Excellent. So next speaker is Councillor David, then Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. On page 279, about the 1.4 million from the reserves for Storm Babette, I'm a bit concerned. I know I've always been critical in the past of we spend money on non-essential services. This is something we should have a fund there available, especially with climate change and the things that are happening, and we do get these disasters, that money's coming from the reserves. And I would like maybe ask Amanda or maybe Charlie why we do need a ring fence fund for that, for natural disasters. The money shouldn't be coming out of reserves. We need the money there available if these things are likely to happen. The other just a couple more points I want to make on is it page 280 on the housing, on affordable housing. I mean, I was pleased that our largest social provider, which is social housing provider, Chraffu, said they're going to build 1,000 houses. But when I read further down the article, that's over 10 years. If it happens, that's 100 a year. I think we need to do a lot more, particularly with the homeless problem, to actually build more homes. There's one final point, Chair. One final point. I'll be brief. It's on the same page, and I think it's 280 on keep people safe. I think one of the things we did do last year that I wasn't happy about was large increases in the telecare costs last September and again in April. That's not keeping people safe, really, and those costs have gone up, and people that rely on that service, mostly people mainly on benefits or people living on their own, older people, are having to pay extras. Some of them are not going to take that service on. So, I think, if we're really committed to safeguarding, we should look to provide that service and not be charging for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. So last speaker we've got is Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. I would have been happy to second, but I just wanted to speak as well. It would be remiss of me not to mention and draw people's attention to the excellent Esting report that is mentioned in the report. for the way we've supported education, and the Gold Award for the youth service, because it's just amazing to see such excellence, and I would want to make sure that all the officers involved in that were well aware that we do appreciate their services, as with the getting the free school meals out ahead of time, and the impressive transformation and development we've got going on in our areas of children's care. So I just wanted to raise people's awareness to those yet again, because I'm very proud of what we've done there. Thank you.
Councillor Hannah. So we've had a proposal and a second. I'd also like to put in an additional proposal there. I think given the debate and the comments made, I'd like to add in the proposal that all the board reports and the audit reports come to members in the members' brief. That would go a long way towards allaying. We have the housing boards, we have all the different boards. I think it'd be really helpful to have the minutes from those to all members in the members' brief, audit reports, add them into that so everybody is able to see them, read them, digest them, and take up any issues to prevent further issues like, you know, the specifics that have been discussed this morning. So I'd like to add that. You can.
I'd have a concern with that in terms of there's a reason why we set up the boards, in order that they have the freedom to discuss and report back to scrutiny regularly, because they do report back extremely regularly. Now, while I understand why that would be appealing, there are snippets in time. So the report that comes to you in scrutiny here is at a point in time that brings things together. If we start bringing different minutes from different meetings across the board, I think we'll have a discussion about things that haven't been concluded. And my concern would be then that we won't be able to drive forward with these projects because we'd be constantly trying to rehearse different arguments without them having come to a conclusion in a report. There is a purpose for a report to scrutiny, and our whole setup is there in order to be accountable to scrutiny and to get the appropriate scrutiny at the right time. So that would be my view on that, but it's entirely a matter for the committee, of course.
I think in terms of transparency and openness, I think it would be really, really helpful for all members of that. Councillor Harry, did you?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just on that point, because I actually have a lot of sympathy with the point you're making. Someone will tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure we can always access board minutes through mod.gov, can we, through the intranet? Also conscious you made the point about audit reports, which are obviously separate to board minutes. Perhaps, look, the Chief Exec has raised some points. Maybe it's something we should consider at a little bit more length. I wonder if this is something that we can take away and we can come back with some sort of proper formal democratic decision, whether or not that's through chairs and vice chairs, whether or not cabinet member makes a decision, whether it comes through democratic services, one way or another. But I think there's a good point there. But perhaps maybe if we looked at it a little bit further, that'd be good. Just to Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Yes, I take that on board. That, as you know, the concerns I've just raised has been raised by cross-party members about lack of information, and unless you're within those boards or within the coalition, then you don't actually get to hear a lot of things. So Matt, did you want to pop in there? See your finger hovering on your buzzer? No?
No, I think Chief Executive's made that point, and I was going to say whether it's very much off topic in terms of the performance self-assessment and really an opportunity to consider what might have other implications, that some of which the Chief Executive has touched upon. The committee wouldn't have that, whereas I suppose with what Councillor Harry has proposed, there would be the opportunity to think about all the implications of that.
Well, I think in terms of our performance, that is really relevant because we're here to represent the public out there, aren't we? So I do think, but I'm happy to go with the will of the committee and to take it up at another point. So, okay, members. So we've now got the recommendations 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. We've had a proposer, haven't we? we've had Councillor Harry, we've had a seconded from Councillor Abdul. So if members would like to show on these recommendations. 6 and 6, yes. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Nope, that's carried then. Thank you. And thank you very much, Yolo, for the report. We now move on to item 13, pages 392 to 439, setting the budget, business planning framework 25-26. Councillor Charlie's going to introduce, and Amanda Hughes, our Strategic Director, Finance and Resources, is going to present.
Diolch, Caderaeth. My predecessor, Sam Rowlands, once said that the most important thing we do as members is set a budget for our officers to deliver the services that our residents require. That's a difficult job, the best of times, and clearly the last few years have not been the best of times. If you look at 1.8, you can see we're looking at another yawning gap between what we need to provide services and what we anticipate we'll have. It's north of £22 million, which is incredibly concerning. There are a number of unknowns as laid out in the report, mostly around pay and pay pressures. Obviously, we don't set those pay levels, but we legally have to pay it. So in order to make what will be, again, really, really difficult decisions, it's really important to have a really clear framework for officers to work with, both in terms of our revenue business cases, our capital business cases, and where there are proposed reductions. So it's standard across the authority, because we're going to have to make these decisions collectively across the board. To be clear, I think any further cuts to our services will be detrimental on the back of 14 years of austerity. So we have to be very, very careful about what we do and how we minimise those impacts. So I will hand over to Amanda. I want to thank her for this. It's got, as I say, clear templates that can be followed, and it's got a clear series of dates there. I would like a little bit of discussion about the budget working groups, Chair. I know obviously last year there were issues around timings and making sure that they're productive and as many members can get to them as possible. So I think it'd be interesting to hear members' opinions. Obviously, there's a balance between having meeting after meeting after meeting and getting the right amount of information. So it's certainly something I'd be keen to hear scrutiny. But at that point, I shall hand over to Amanda. Thank you.
To Charlie, yes, I welcome that comment. We need to make it more accessible, both in terms of the online side of it, because that didn't really work in some of the budget working groups, did it? So thanks. Amanda.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Charlie, for the introduction. Yeah, so as Charlie's already outlined, this report serves two purposes, I guess. One is to put the practical arrangements in place in terms of sort of the timetables and also the documentation requirements for services, and you'll be familiar with that over the years. Just in the context, just focusing on the timetable and the documentation, the framework itself first. It is largely in line with previous years, although there are some changes to it, which I'll just reference quickly. So because of the tight financial position, we have introduced a couple of additional steps in terms of the processes that are going to be undertaken in relation to business cases. So they will come through now SLT to get a collective support for business cases before they then go for consideration with members. We've also improved and strengthened the template in relation to budget saving proposals. You'll be aware that in the past it was quite brief, and I think that possibly led to some members not realising what some of the proposals were, etc. So there's an expanded template in relation to savings proposals to hopefully allow members more information to allow them to understand the proposals that are on the table at the point they're considered through the democratic process. So they're probably the sort of key main changes, but other than that, it's not dissimilar to previous years. You'll be aware, obviously, we already addressed and changed the template for business cases last year, pardon me, to be more focused, I think, on the financial side of it rather than excessive narrative supporting or justifying the claim. I think just to highlight key factors in terms of the timetable as well. Heads of service are being asked to submit proposals in terms of business cases and budget savings proposals by the end of this month. Members will be aware that following SIPFA's advice and our own thinking anyway, we've been holding officer-led strategic budget groups, which have been challenging services around their proposals using some of the sort of benchmarking information that we've had from SIPFA and other information in that sense. And so those proposals and all that will be sort of in a way coming in at the end of this month. The first although I'll be bringing a report on the start of the process at the next meeting, that obviously will be too early in the context of summarising those proposals. So as referenced earlier with Councillor Anne, they'll actually come through in a democratic report in January. But obviously, as discussed already, again, we will be having budget working groups so that members are au fait with those proposals in November. Other key points to the timetable is we've been notified now by Welsh Government that we will be receiving the draft local government settlement on the 11th of December. Unfortunately, no earlier. We're still unclear whether it'll be a 1-year settlement or more than that. I do anticipate it would be a 1-year settlement. And obviously the final budget will come through from Welsh Government at the end of February, and that's obviously when we've got to set our budget as well. So yeah, hopefully, therefore, with that explanation, the actual framework itself is self-explanatory, and hopefully members are happy to approve that. Moving then perhaps to the bigger discussion point maybe is the actual scale of the funding gap. So as Councillor Charlie has highlighted, we in reality are facing now a further potential resource shortfall of some a bit shy of 23 million. Having said that, I will caveat that at this stage in that I obviously haven't had business cases and information coming through from services about what the pressures are. And so whilst I've obviously within this estimate of 23 million assumed pressures of around 11 or 12 million, if the business cases turn out to be a greater pressure, then obviously that gap will go up. But this is sort of in the ballpark of where we are at the moment. So I guess I make that point that I've made every year at this point in time, that this is a best guess estimate. It isn't meant to be accurate at this point, in that it's meant to be an indication, because obviously as we progress through the processes over the coming months, then obviously the clarity and accuracy will come. Having said that, obviously what I won't ever have clarity on before we set the budget is the pay awards for next year. You'll be aware that in terms of the current year, the teachers' pay award has recently been settled at 5.5%, which is actually greater than the Welsh Government independent body recommended for teachers. They recommended 4.3, but obviously because a decision was taken in England to give 5.5, that has meant that decision therefore has to be honoured in Wales as well. So it will be 5.5% for teachers in Wales from September 24. The pay award for local government staff has yet to be agreed for the current year. There was a pay offer of £1,290 per incremental point made earlier in the year. A decision was taken to go out to ballot about strike action. That's not yet been concluded. I think it's been concluded this month, the decision as to whether to strike. Your guess is good as mine whether that will happen. I guess I would make the observation in general terms that it feels like other parts of the public sector have recently had more beneficial pay awards than been expected, and therefore maybe that might motivate people to be more inclined to want to strike. But time will tell. So the fact we won't, I suspect, there's a danger we won't even have the current year's pay awards settled by the time we have to set the budget. It therefore means that there's no chance at all of knowing what an offer even for the April 25 pay award would be for NJC staff. So obviously, an estimate has to be made on that, and you'll see in the papers that I've made an estimate at this point of 4% for both NJC and for teachers next year. Time will tell whether that turns out to be accurate. So they're the caveats I guess I just want to place in terms of the estimate now of the actual cost pressures that we're likely to have in the region of 23 million or maybe more. Moving then, I guess, to talk about where that money would come from. Obviously, as is always the case, it will have to come from, hopefully, money through the Welsh Government settlement, members' decisions around council tax, and then members' decisions around budget reductions, because it is evident we will not be receiving 23 million from Welsh Government, and therefore we absolutely will be in the realms of a combination of council tax and budget reductions. Just in terms then of what the likely Welsh Government settlement is, obviously we don't know with any certainty at the moment. What we do know, and more intelligent people than me in terms of economists, etc., are predicting if you turn to page 397. I've put a graph there, which is some recent information that I've had, from a presentation to the Society of Welsh Treasurers just 2 or 3 weeks ago, an analysis by the Wales Fiscal Analysis of what they anticipate the outlook for public sector spending in Wales is going to be. So just in terms of this graph, just to clarify, there's two columns, should I say, a grey one and a red one, just to explain the difference between those. So the grey column represents the previous government spending plans. So under the previous government spending plans, it was anticipated that Wales and Welsh Government's budget would increase by less than 1% during the period 24-25 to 28-29. The red column represents what it is anticipated based on their manifesto that the Labour government's commitment to public services and money into Welsh Government would be. So what that shows is that there is a marginal increase, but actually largely in line with the previous government's spending plans. But what this says is that there's actually going to be an increase of 1.1% in real terms during that period, projected spending to Welsh Government. What the columns then to the right of the chart show is Welsh Government's Welsh Government's announced plans in relation to where it will be allocating that money in terms of public service spending. And what you can very clearly see is that the commitments to NHS spending are a significant or a comparative significant growth, and actually therefore local government funding and funding for other spending areas within Welsh Government's overall budget are actually going to take a decrease. So the outlook therefore it really is not very positive. Having said that, we are aware and we hear occasional snippets of information coming from Welsh Government, which may indicate that there might be some sign of additional money in certain ways. So, for instance, I referenced the Teachers' Pay Award earlier. So Welsh Government have confirmed that we will be getting some additional funding towards that increase in teachers' pay. Not the full 5.5%, but the difference between the 5.5% and their own estimates that they used in the settlement that we've already had. So we might get some top up effectively of that. There are also, I think, noises from UK government around possible more spending in education, but we'll have to wait and see how that might flow through into our budget. I'll also just point out as well that another issue I think we potentially have with our settlement is that, again, based on some early indicative information that I've had about the distribution based on population, that we once again potentially will be a loser in our settlement in the current year, in the next year, should I say, as a result of redistribution based on population numbers. So once again, Conwy losing money and authorities with increases in population gaining money. So I at this point in time, I think really we probably are better off just assuming we won't get any additional funding from Welsh Government, or it will be very marginal. So that therefore means that the £23 million shortfall we are left to deal with through a combination of budget reductions and council tax. As I've set out in table 1 at the bottom, and you'll be familiar with, a 1% increase in council tax raises £780,000, and if we were to plug the 23 million shortfall exclusively with council tax, that would require an increase in council tax of some 30%. So clearly, I appreciate that doesn't feel a very palatable option, and therefore, in reality, it will, as has been for a number of years, have to be a combination of budget reductions and council tax. And obviously, time will tell as we go through the process as to how members and ultimately full council want to address that. I have also just put in the report, just for information, in table 2, I've set out our existing budgets for 24-25, and you know, I guess the point really of demonstrating this or putting this for information is what it demonstrates ultimately is we spend more than 80% of our budget, our service budgets, on education and social care, and you know, appreciating that those are services that are dealing with you know, our young and our most vulnerable. You know, it is clearly demonstrates the difficult and severe predicament that we find ourselves in. I say we find ourselves in, you know, I don't think we are any different really from any other authority. You know, this is the outlook for all of local authorities across Wales and in fact UK. And it does sort of, I guess, increasingly feel you know, that the system is broken somewhere and that public finance needs to be relooked at. But that's obviously for bigger and more important people than me to deal with. So yeah, I guess really that's what I wanted to draw to your attention in terms of the outlook, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive run through, Amanda. Another difficult year ahead. Okay, members, who's got questions? Councillor David, then Councillor Harry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Amanda about Betsyqualda Health Board, and as I looked at the proposals from the Welsh Government, as I see it, there's going to be no real increase in health spending in North Wales. I think there are problems, and we hear a lot about bed blocking, but we don't hear the other side when people are coming out of hospital too soon, and then a large packages of care have to be put in, and do they have a responsibility to pay for some of that when people are coming out of hospital and really it's not viable for them to go home unless they would put a large package of care in, and there are people who are not able to pay for the care themselves, so it's coming out of our budget. Do we have conversations with them about that, Amanda? You know, that really it's a big burden on our social services when people come out too soon. Do you have conversations with them about that, and do we get any compensation for that to help with the care?
I'm positive, you know, social care colleagues. I don't know if anyone is on the line, but I'm positive social care colleagues liaise.
Jenny's on.
Oh, there we are. Well, maybe Jenny, probably you're better at answering this than me.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. Yes, Jenny's there and hopefully going to come in now. Deal, Jenny.
Yeah, sorry.
Did you get Councillor David's question? Would you like him to just repeat?
Just in respect of funding NHS.
Funding. Yes, getting it back from Betsy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's an awful lot of work that, sorry, my background's come off. There's an awful lot that we do in terms of joint working with the Health Board. It's at the outset in terms of joint funded care packages. What we are noticing is that because the Health Board have not matched the increase, or actually they haven't increased their fees for the care sector for some 2 years, that care home residents are not able to take NHS funded patients from hospital because the costs are just not sufficient. So we're definitely seeing that an impact on obviously, you know, where do those residents then go? And it's definitely having well, yeah, I guess a financial impact, because ultimately those individuals need that care and support. We've definitely seen a shift in relation to jointly funded packages of care for complex cases. And it's just, you know, for as long as I can remember, we have peaks and troughs in relation to that. For older people generally, it's usually been quite stable, but for the reasons I've just cited, we're seeing that impinge on our own resources. Children with complex needs, you're well versed in that discussion and dilemma, and also people with disabilities, complex disability, and mental health. It's not a smooth process. I mean, we discuss this continually, the Health Board, and obviously they'll be joining us soon, so it's a good point of discussion. But yeah, we have specific dedicated officers who are focused on ensuring that we've got that arrangement in place for health funding. But yeah, it's not easy.
Deal, Jenny. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I remember when I held the social care portfolio, the higher the rank of the staff we sent to argue our case from Betsy to Betsy, the higher they went as well, and it became quite a battle, didn't it? Yes, and they do not step up to their responsibilities. They really don't. So thank you for that question, Councillor David. An important one for the social care budget. Next is Councillor Harry. We've got quite a few speakers on this, so Councillor Harry next.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'm afraid I've got a couple of points, but I'll be as quick as I can with them. First of all, I think the leader in his brief intro touched on the role of working groups and perhaps scheduling of those. Really appreciate that, and thank you to Charlie for keeping an open mind in respect to that. I'd have thought, looking at them previously, they were all consistently, so not all of them, 5 out of 6 of them were at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I'd have thought if we could have a mix, perhaps if you did 6 again, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening, and maybe mix up the days rather than just having them consistently on Tuesdays, that would hopefully see some more engagement. So that's my feedback. Don't know if that's useful at this stage, but for what it's worth, there we go. The largest point I wanted to touch on, or the one I think is probably most important, is the timetable for setting the budget. Now, members might recall, I was going to say this year, even we had a particularly challenging set of financial circumstances, and obviously budget reductions or real terms budget reductions had to be made in respect to schools. Schools found themselves in a position where they were having to consider redundancies of staff, but unfortunately, and if I can find the date, because I do have them here, the deadline for them beginning that redundancy process would have been the 20th of February, yet a number of schools in Conway did not feel that they were reliably informed by this council what level of budget reduction they would have to make. So they were having to make a decision: do you either make staff redundant, not knowing whether or not it's necessary, or do you wait until you have your budget reduction, commence the redundancy process and not complete it properly, which I think would be, frankly, a disgrace. I think teaching staff and school staff are employees. They do have employee rights, and those should be respected even when we're having to make difficult decisions. Now, I'm looking through the budget timetable we've got here, and there's an entry in it: Cabinet to endorse all revenue business cases, budget reductions and review provisional settlement on the 14th of January. So I'd expect at that stage the council would be pretty confident of what the budget will look like. Cabinet will set out largely what the budget is, and by virtue of the cabinet being the cabinet, you have a majority. You would like to hope that that would pass. So schools would be able to be told, look, budget hasn't been set yet, but this is very likely what you'll be planning with for finances for the next year. So I'd just like to know, if schools are having to look at redundancies again for next financial year, what's the date they need to start that process? And will schools be given information that they can 99.9% rely upon to get their financial arrangements in place for the year ahead?
Excellent question, Councillor Harry. As a governor, we're all being asked that. So, Councillor Charlie.
I think you highlight, Harry, the real importance of having multi-year settlements to get your budget figure in December. I mean, it was later. It was towards 20th last year. I think we're now looking at the 10th. To have that figure, then have your official figure, and not have your final figure in February, is incredibly challenging. And you're absolutely right. If it's a situation where schools are looking to make runs and not having to do it, well, that's a nonsense. So that is challenging. What I would say last year is, in terms of the decisions we made at Cabinet, that they went through council. There weren't any changes in terms of what schools were asked to save last year and what we actually did. You are quite right. There was a majority there, although it's still incredibly difficult for members to support the amount of council tax and the cuts that we have. I don't have the actual detail on the actual date, but just in terms of the meetings, yeah, the budget working group, I think get some feedback on that. I think we need to do them a bit more condensed in so much as looking at the actual decisions we're being asked to make. It was really good for services to set out their challenges and what they do, but I'm not sure whether it got to the nuts, not the actual nuts and bolts about what we were actually looking at cutting and the consequences of that. So I think we will look to have a mixture. How many we'll need and how difficult, we'll have a chat about that as to what works best for the majority of members. So in terms of actual date, Amanda, I don't have the actual technical detail on that.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have the technical detail in terms of a redundancy date, but I could obviously make sure we find that and let you know. I guess just to make a little bit of a wider observation about schools, so in the sense of, we're very cognizant of the need for schools to have information as soon as possible, and also, we're aware in terms of setting the current year's budget that a number of schools are dependent on in-year use of reserves, etc. So, we've been working closely with schools throughout the year to try and assist them in how they manage their budget position. And for instance, just last week, we held training for school governors to assist school governors to hopefully provide useful information to assist school governors in how they can help support their schools. I think the key issue really, and I guess the key issue for schools and for us as a council actually is that I think there's a tendency, for want of a better phrase, to wait until we have the settlement before we start to do anything, almost. And at the end of the day, when you know potentially you already have a shortfall because you've relied on balances or whatever, then clearly there's a need to be working on that and addressing that sort of from the off. So yeah, the education finance team and obviously the education improvement support team are very actively seeking to work with schools, and we will be looking obviously to get a steer in terms of that reduction for schools ASAP. We do have to give them indicative allocations pre-Christmas, and that needs to effectively have pretty much the right figure in at that point. So yeah, but I'll get you the redundancy trigger date. I don't know what that is.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor
Can I
Howard,
just come back on something Amanda picked up on there? Because obviously you've talked about role the education team playing, talking to schools, ensuring they have that information, and you said that they were supposed to be given indicative figures ahead of Christmas normally. Now, I mean, I'm not saying this to rehash last year, but I think it's really important to bear in mind. My understanding, certainly one school I'm aware of, at the redundancy date or thereabouts, so this would have been February, so long after Christmas, they were told your budget reduction, we don't know yet, it will be somewhere between 5 and 8%. That's what they were told supposedly by someone in the education team. Now, I've heard that secondhand. Obviously, I wasn't the person having that discussion, so I don't want to say that that is correct, but that's information I want to say reliably received. So perhaps if we can bear that in mind to ensure that that communication with schools is really, really clear at the earliest opportunity. So just an observation, that's not criticism, but it's just some feedback.
Yeah, I guess I would question the factual accuracy of that, given that as a council we set the budget on something like the 29th of February. But I take the point that we need to make sure schools are communicated with properly, and certainly I can see Councillor Julie wants to come in, but from Councillor Julie and Charlie down, we're seeking to support those schools as best we can.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Julie, do you just want to come in on that item quickly? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say that obviously we work, Harry, to provide schools with an indicative figure as early as possible. There was some delay this year, a little delay because obviously, as the leader has already said, we didn't get the figure until quite late in December. And then add to that we had the new finance system that rolled out. So there were some issues with schools receiving the reconciliation for some months a little bit later. And obviously the finance team were incredibly busy working on that. As we move forward, my hope is that new finance system means that schools will actually be able to receive more information, be more informed when they're making those decisions. But yeah, certainly in terms of that indicative figure, the teams will work to provide that as early as possible again. And I should imagine that will be the case as we move forward this year or early next year. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Julie. Thank you for that. Next, we've got 4 more speakers, and can we bear in mind, please, we've got 2 more reports to go through. So next speaker, Councillor Abdul.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be glad to know one of the questions been answered by Julie regarding letting the schools know much as soon as possible. And I think the governors and teachers does understand it's a vicious circle, isn't it? If we don't know, we can't tell them. So if the West government don't let us know in early enough, we can't do it. But at least we will not, hopefully, will not have a repeat of last year. But on others, it's been discussed about the budget working group and everything. I don't think, it doesn't matter how many meetings we have, we can't create miracle. We know one thing for sure, tax will go up and service will be cut because that's the way it's looking, unfortunately, isn't it? And we have touched on Bernard formula in past. I don't know if the leader has spoken to the Welsh government that we are, the population overall is decreasing in Conway, but we've got elderly population, which we need to manage. So I guess my question is, has leader, I know he's been speaking to the Welsh government, has he touched on the Bernard formula? Are they going to do anything about this? And also, we have been using nearly 1.5 million from reserve last year. How much reserve have we got left? That's my question to Amanda. How much reserve do we have left? Please.
Councillor Abdul. Amanda?
Just in terms of reserves then, I think obviously we have a range of reserves and balances. You'll recall that when we did the outturn, we considered you considered the reserves and balances. So I think in general balances, so effectively not earmarked or allocated for any other purpose, we have somewhere just over £4 million. We then have a number of earmarked reserves. I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but they're in the region of around 20 million. But some of those are earmarked for specific purposes and are needed. But within that, there are a number of earmarked reserves sort of to support the budget position, which I think in total amount to around 10 million. So in reality, we're sort of in the realms of only having about £14 million to support our financial sustainability. So, you know, we are once again, and I would very strenuously be advising in the budget setting process that we cannot use reserves to balance the budget. You know, any overspending in the current year will need to come from any you know, unforeseen events, as we had, for argument's sake, Storm Babette last year cost us several £100,000. You know, we have to retain reserves for those purposes. So unfortunately, they won't be able to be a feature in the budget setting process.
Yeah, can I come back on that, Chair? So it does really look bleak, isn't it? We can't use the reserve. As Amanda said, its likelihood is 30% of council tax going up. That's not realistic. So I don't know what cloud leader has, if he's got any comment.
Yeah, thank you, Abdul. I think a key date is the 30th of October when the Chancellor of the Exchequer will make her statement. Clearly, the vast majority of funding to Welsh Government comes via UK Government and then comes to us. So the actual quantum of how much money is going to be spent in public services will be key. The Barnett formula, I think everyone accepts it's out of date. I think Mr. Barnett himself disowned it in the end, that it doesn't reflect the actual cost and need of care. I think the biggest thing it fails is actually recognising the cost of dealing with an ageing population. And I think, again, in Conwy, that has not been picked up with our funding formula. The gap between us and our neighbours grows every year. It was 15% with Denbighshire per head. When I started, it's now 16.8. Similarly, it was 10 with Gwynedd, and it's now 11.4. So those gaps are moving all the time. In terms of other points you made about the social care, I'm actually one of the spokespersons for health and social care. I attend a Connecting Care meeting, which is about how we work in terms of getting people out of hospitals. We make the point there all the time. There's an additional £400 million put into the health budget last year. There was actually nothing for councils, and we just can't continually be asked to produce more and more and more with less and less staff. That there has to be a balance there about where that money goes and where that funding goes. Other issues, I think, that we've done badly out of the HS2 in terms of consequentials coming to Wales. You know, there's a huge amount of money spent, then abandoned. I think it's indefensible to say there was an equal benefit for residents in North Wales and Mid Wales, indeed, for a project which has actually never been completed. So all those issues are raised all the time, Abdul. I try and do it as frequently and as eloquently and as factually based as I can. Quite frankly, I begin to bore myself sometimes because it's incredibly frustrating that there's not more people listening. But yeah, I think 30th of this month will set the tone, I think, for absolutely everything. That's the key thing, as to what the Chancellor of the Exchequer thinks her priorities are. So yeah, we'll wait and see.
Thank you, Charlie. Thanks, Chair. Just one last minute. We are going to ask the department to do, we will say saving. It's no more saving now, it's cuts, basically. So that's, you know, all the department have to do more cuts. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Abdul. Diolch. Councillor Ann next. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And if you could just bear with me because my broadband connection is quite unstable, but it does come back. I'd like to thank Harry for his considerable questioning around schools. So you'll be relieved to know I won't make any questions about that. In terms of the framework, I'm pleased it's been strengthened. I'm particularly heartened by the fact that SLT have put some strenuous controls in place and are holding heads of service to account for their spending, and particularly we've got external input and benchmarking into the process. However, one thing, I mean, you're talking, Amanda, about having member workshops in November, and we had them for many a year in many a format, and they don't seem to be particularly effective. Perhaps more of a talking shop. You know, for me, I would like to see whether it's at these November workshops or certainly before January 6th meeting in 2025, that scrutiny members, if not all members, have an opportunity to see and discuss the proposed reductions before that meeting, because clearly year on year on year, that meeting is always got a massive agenda. It's got reports of 400-500 pages. It's talking about cuts for every service, etc., and lots of things I think don't get properly understood. So I'd like to seek assurance that the FROSC, this committee, who we're meeting on the 6th of January to consider the proposals, will we have an opportunity to be briefed in advance, whether that's in the member workshop or before or after even.
Councillor Charlie, if you want to come in.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I did when I was talking to Harry before about the timing of the budget working groups, I thought that we do need to be more focused about what the actual cuts are. I think what we had last year was a bit more like a glorified SPR, and that they were setting out what they did and the challenges they faced. I think we really need to look and see, well, what are we actually proposing? And we've got time to discuss that. And I guess also importantly for me is that if people aren't happy with what's proposed, that we have to make those cuts elsewhere, because it can be all too easy to say I don't want the cuts and I don't want the council tax, but we have to take responsibility that it's balanced. So that's certainly how I see it working. Is that there is that meaningful time to discuss it and look at the options rather than it just being this is the service, this is what it does. If that's helps.
No, that provides considerable assurance, Charlie, because it's impossible for scrutiny members to come up with, on the 6th of January, with no sort of detailed insight of what's being proposed for cuts, unless you've actually gone beyond the figures, which obviously are many. So I'm reassured if that's going to happen, whether it's in November or even whether it's in December. So I'll wait to hear what you're doing on that. I mean, my next sort of thing is about, we seem to have excluded public consultation from our timetable and our process, if I've got that correctly. And that really concerns me. You know, you will all know that I have lobbied for this for many a year, and that we did it. And I would just remind us all
off,
that
Councillor Anne, you turn your camera off because it's coming and going. Lovely.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. I'd just like to remind us all that £91 million, according to today's report, is what our council tax payers paid to us in council tax. And of course, that's likely to go over the 100 million figure if the likelihood of double figure council taxes is in prospect. So it seems to me, unreasonable if we are going to exclude public consultation. And I don't mean on waffly ideas of what's the preference, whatever. It's about, this is what we're going to do. Give me your feedback, because I think it should be just like I've articulated with members. We need to be consulting on proposed cuts in January 2025. And I don't see that within the report. Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. Fair point, Councillor Anne, and it's not not in the report because of an intention not to consult. I think it's not in the report as an oversight on my part, because I think we still are thinking about how we consult, because as you rightly say, I guess we consulted last year, didn't we, in a little bit more of a conceptual way, and I guess what I would like us to be able to do, as you equally say, is to consult on actual proposals. Because we're sort of in a way changing our approach for the first time this year, I think I'm just not quite sighted at the moment on what that would look like, and I think that's the issue as to why I haven't put it in the report. So the absence on the report doesn't signal no intention to consult. It signals that I haven't quite worked out how to do it yet.
Okay, so I'm pleased to hear that it will be in the timetable. And then the final question is, I don't think we've ever produced for members and indeed the public a community impact assessment of our proposed budget cuts, because that's the thing that strategically brings home to us all of what is literally going to be the impact on the various initiatives and objectives that we have. And it seems to me, if we're making these cuts and doing all this work, it would be reasonable to actually give members the strategic overview impact assessment of what the 2025-26 budget cuts. I've seen it in Denbighshire. It's a document that I think is not too difficult to put together, but I think it's really important, particularly if we are trying to take not just members with us, but actually the public with us.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. Amanda, do you want to?
Yeah, only to say, obviously we do a quality impact assessments on the individual proposals, and I guess I don't see any issue in us seeking to pull together something along the lines you're suggesting, Councillor Anne. So if you leave that with us, then we can give that some thought.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for those questions, Councillor Anne. Yeah, just to reassure members, as Chair of FROSC, I've already had a preliminary discussion with Councillor Charlie about how we're going to do the budget setting. The February meeting of this committee is going to be an in-depth look at the budget with each cabinet member to present what their cuts are going to be, with both the intended and unintended consequences of each one. So there'll be presentation from the 10 cabinet members, and members will have a really detailed time for detailed questions. You know, you've only got to look at the reaction to some of the budget cuts that we've had this year. Members were saying they didn't realise they'd voted for certain things, so we're absolutely going to make sure that it's very, very clear going forward. And I welcome the public consultation and demands, but we will be meeting to sort that out. So thank you. We've got two more speakers, Councillor Paul and Councillor Gareth, and we really have to move to the vote now. So Councillor Paul, quick.
Thank you for letting me speak. I wonder if you'll allow me just to quote two sentences back to Amanda from a previous report in relation to budget setting. She said, if services cannot make savings agreed as part of the budget, there is an expectation they will manage their overall budget and therefore find alternative savings. Staying with an overall budget is a key discipline, but this approach can leave a whole council, unsighted on the delivery of savings agreed in the annual budget, and mean that the assumptions about future budgets, including that previous year's savings have been delivered, are inaccurate. And I think that's a very telling point, because we set a budget and then we get the first quarter's report and it's overspent. And then what happens, and I think we have tightened this up, the professional leaders in the particular departments are directed to find alternative savings. I'm not sure they always do find the alternative savings, but they find alternative savings. But when we're not in this budget process, given that information about whether those savings and how those savings have been, so we start making assumptions about that budget because we're not cited on it. Now, I think we need to ensure in this next budget process that that issue is definitely tackled. And let me just refer to the issue for that, even in schools' budgets, for example, because what I was conscious of, school sets a budget, and that same process that Manda's alerted us to happens in school budgets. And that is a real concern because we know we didn't have the correct information when we were setting school budgets as governors. I mean, the school I was a governor on was actually directed almost by the finance department to take out a loan. And then subsequently, when the final figures came through this autumn of last year's budget, we found out we'd underspent by over £50,000. So the point I make about that is that that needs to be during this budget setting. The other issue, which I really want to focus on, is education and social services, because we talk a lot about money allocated from Welsh government and UK government. We talk a lot about pay and all of that. But actually, the things we have control over here locally are these budgets. Now, we all know we're going to have to ration even further the social care provision, both at the preventative level for children, adults and older people, but also when they're actually desperate for the care. That's going to have to be further rationed. And I'm not persuaded those detailed discussions, certainly I'm not involved in them, but those detailed discussions are taking place. Likewise, and and I bore myself about this as well, in education, we still are not tackling the biggest issue, the unfilled school places, 3,000 of them. We're still not tackling the school funding formula. Now, in my view, those detailed issues, even now, we need reassurance that those discussions are coming on and that is happening now. Otherwise, we will be deeply frustrated later in this budget setting provision because we'll still be raising these same issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Paul. I don't know, Councillor Charlie or Councillor Julie, which one's going to answer briefly, please, really briefly. Can you reassure Councillor Paul?
Just to say to Paul, as I've said to Paul numerous times, these discussions are being had. Yes, you're not currently in that working group, but the task and finish, well, not task and finish group, the cabinet member working group chair that I've set up, we are looking at those very items. We are looking at places, the number of places in schools. We are looking at forward work plan in terms of whether that's federalisation, amalgamation, or perhaps other things which could possibly involve school closures or a reduction in the footprint that we have. And we are also looking at cost per pupil. We're looking at all of those, and there's a working group that are working on that, and it will come back at some point with recommendations. But yes, we are looking at those, and obviously as a department they are also looking at those. That information is collated each year. It's just that obviously, Paul, you're not a cabinet member, you're not a member of some of those groups, but just because you don't see it happening does not mean it's not happening, and I've told you repeatedly it is. So Chair, yeah, it's actually progressing in a really positive way. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Charlie, do we have the equivalent in social care? I don't think Councillor Liz and Penny are here. But do we have the same going on in social care?
Yeah, we've got really talented staff who are very committed to the care of our residents. But I think we need to move away. The idea of our budget is an estimation of what we're going to have to spend to deliver services in the next year. It is dependent on demand. It's dependent on need. If we have less homeless people, we'll spend less money on homeless. If we don't have Stone Babbitt, we would save 600k. So there are instances where service will spend more money in one aspect than they'd anticipated, and they'll spend less in another aspect. So I think fluctuations in a budget throughout the course of a year are quite normal. I think traditionally we have seen services spend more at the start of the financial year. I think that's quite normal as well, and then towards the end of the year, because that's how these things work. So I have the reassurance. I don't like the idea of rationing anything. I don't think that's in a policy for ours. I think where there's somebody needs care, we will do our absolute utmost to provide that care, and that's absolutely what we should be doing.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. Yeah, I think it's the point. We've got to move on now,
Well, no, I
Councillor
think
Paul.
it's the issue of
Honestly,
rationing, but we are rationing people now by the systems that we have. We choose between different youngsters that get ALL support. We choose between the level of support that we give when we do social care assessments. We are rationing services now in both education and social care. We shouldn't be in denial about that, and we shouldn't be in denial that we're going to have to ration even more tighter going forward. And so I use the word rationing.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
No, but the lead is not acknowledging the rationing we're having to do, and it's important that is acknowledged.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Paul. I think it's the overspend issues that I'll add you on to the end, Councillor David. I think it was the overspend issues that Councillor Paul for us to acknowledge about the overspends within the services, what we were talking about before. Right, next we've got Councillor Gareth and then briefly Councillor David come back and then Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, I'll be as brief as possible. My point that I was going to bring with the school's budget has already been adequately made about the desirability to get it out there ASAP. Running on from that, I was just going to ask Amanda, are we going to try and estimate, if there are redundancies, for example, the cost of those redundancies so that we're actually looking at the full picture when we're actually making the decisions and we're setting budgets for redundancies, be it in schools or anywhere else, and also trying to estimate that if we cut in one area, is it going to have a knock-on effect to increase costs in another area? And, just widening our view and looking at the big picture when we're making these really difficult decisions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gareth. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of redundancies, I think a lesson learned, I guess, from last year in the context of the process has been picked up. So obviously, any redundancy implications of the budget reductions will seek to make a reasonable estimate about what one-off monies might be used or needed to support that, and obviously that can factor into the decisions. And in terms of that wider impact, again, actually, I think by having perhaps more detailed scrutiny of the actual savings proposals through the budget working groups, rather than have more, I guess, generic conversations, I think will allow us to in more detail look at those, the cross-pollination, I guess, of the impact of one saving on another, because I think at the moment, probably, the proposals are put forward with a degree of departmental perspective only on them, and we need to, as you say, to make sure there's not unintended consequences elsewhere. So we'll seek to do that both through the budget working groups, but also through the actual documentation that comes with the proposals.
Lovely, thank you very much, Amanda. Councillor David, just very briefly.
I'll be very brief and I'll be to the point.
Thank
that a lot of the, we're talking about rationing, we need to be mindful, a lot of the services we provide in social care are statutory services, and we shouldn't be asking that we have to provide, we shouldn't be asking our officers to break the law. So yeah, I understand the pressures of the budget, and we do have to find money, but we have to always actually sort of carry out the statutory services, particularly in social services. So there's a lot of things we do that are very nice that we like, that we'll have to look at them, but we can't be rationing statutory services. So, so just to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Right, we're moving to the vote now. So brief, Councillor Chris, pop your microphone on, please.
Thanks, Chair. There's a lot has been said about our own internal departments, but one of the things we've relied on recently is asks of local town and community councils. And when we're telling them in January, it's often too late because they're setting their precept and if they've got any questions. So if, I take Colwyn Bay as an example. Colwyn Bay Town Council meets every 6 weeks, but its main meeting is its precept meeting is in January. It hasn't got not only the detail, but had the opportunity to have conversations with people, then they can't do it. And I think that applies to most town and community councils.
Thank you for that. Yeah, good point. Okay. Amanda.
sorry, just to come back, Councillor Chris, to hopefully provide some assurance. We met with the Town and Community Council Forum just last week to start the conversation around our collaborative arrangements with them, and I've committed to for us to write out to Town and Community Councils by the end of this month, stroke early next month, with more detailed proposals, which will then, as you say, allow appropriate dialogue to take place in advance of Christmas and the budget setting period, because we absolutely want to ensure that we work in the best way with Town and Community Councils and ensure that our combined resources, I guess, are put to best effect. So absolutely want to take on board the lessons from the past in relation to that.
Thank you, Amanda. That's really reassuring to hear. So, have we even had a proposer and seconder? We're getting a little bit low on the blood sugar. Okay, proposer and seconder for the recommendations, please. Councillor Hannah, and your second. Lovely. Thank you. Proposed by Councillor Hannah, seconded by Councillor Chris. Would members like to show in favour? 2, 3, 4, 5 and 4. Anyone against? 1. Any abstentions? No, that is carried, members. Thank you very much, Amanda. We now move on to item 14, Waste Transfer Station Project Update, pages 440 to 445. We've got Councillor Gromway standing in for Councillor Jeff, who sent his apologies. He's going to introduce the report, and Jim Espley, Waste Manager, is going to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Jeff was had to attend another meeting. So when Jeff and I took on the portfolios of the ERF over 2 years ago, the first thing we did, well, one of the first things we did was visit all our sites across the county. And it was apparent to us then that many of our sites were ageing and becoming unfit for purpose. So we challenged our officers to look at better ways of working, certainly as far as waste management and the changes in the environmental regulations that we have to comply for. Some of our facilities are not fit for purpose, and therefore we've embarked on the process of looking at modernising those facilities, part of the transformation of the ERF service. Now, this came to the Brickwork site, came to this committee back in July last year, where it was agreed that we continue with that strategy. And in that process, our office has been busily working at bringing forward the sites of Brickwork site for the waste transfer site. As you know, the current depot in Bronanant is aging, very much working in the open space, in open air, which will no longer be allowed in legislation coming forward. So we are looking to develop the situation in the Brickwork site, and we have progressed to the stage where it's now in planning, and that will be considered in the next few months, hopefully. And then there will be a business case coming forward to progress that, to look for the funding elements of it. So that's generally the feedback. Is in the report. It's for an update of this committee of where we're up to, and I'm sure Jim will answer any questions you may have on that.
Yeah, I do have some slides. I'm just attached to Zoom, so I'll just try and share the screen. Quickly go through those.
Jim, keep your microphone closer, please. I can't hear.
Sorry, yeah. There we go. So how do I get this presentation up?
You need to be more shouty like members.
Okay, great. So I think we can see the slides now. So although it's not showing the same that's on my screen, so that's going to be a bit confusing. Where's that? Don't know why it's doing that.
Jim, do you want me to share the presentation for you? Would that be easier?
If you don't mind, yeah, it'd be a real help, please. Yeah. Yeah. I stopped. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you. If you want to just run through that briefly.
There we are. Yes, we're synced up now, so we're okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, reason for the report, as Councillor Gromley mentioned, was the closure of the brickworks programme last year. One of the recommendations was that we do come back to this committee to provide update on this standalone waste transfer station project. So into the next slide. What we need to understand is, why do we need waste transfer? And consider the three sort of broad groups of waste that we actually handle as an authority. So group number one is residual waste. That's, some people might also call that non-recyclable waste. It's your black bin waste. Least favourite of terms of is general waste. We collect about 20,000 tonnes of residual waste per annum. And the current transfer arrangement for that is we use a third-party waste transfer station to handle that waste for us, to receive it, store it, and move it on for subsequent treatment, because we don't have the facility to handle that ourselves. The next broad category of waste which we need transfer and treatment for is the other sort of municipal waste. So this is the type of waste we pick up from street litter bins, fly-tipped waste that we've collected and cleared, road sweepings, ground maintenance waste, highways waste, all that sort of stuff. That waste is currently deposited at our MRF material recycling facility station on Bronnanant Road in Mochtra. And then the third main category of waste that we handle is our recyclable waste. So that's the curbside collected material from domestic and commercial properties. So it's the paper, the card, glass, plastic, cans, and food waste. All that waste currently goes through our Goffer bulking station near Abergele. So the sort of current status of or setup of how we handle the waste transfer is as follows. So as I said, residual waste transfer station, we don't have the facility to do that ourselves, so we have to contract that out. That's a contracted service which costs in the region of £220,000 per annum to let that contract. The municipal waste goes into the MRF in Mochtra. Very small site. It's possibly not compliant with the environmental permit that we have in force on the site, and there's no real potential for enhancing that site in terms of doing a better job with the waste that we have to handle coming through that facility. And then Goffer bulking station, we know that is not compliant with the environmental permit that we hold on the site for fire prevention and mitigation plan conditions. It's quite old infrastructure now, and without sort of investing into this site, we're unable to increase either the throughput of tonnage going through that facility or the range of materials, additional types of materials, which we will need to do in the future. To progress. So back in April 21, there was the Cabinet approval for the provision of a waste transfer station at the old brickwork site, subject to further due diligence. So those due diligence reports, they take time, they're very detailed and complex. So we've had to do the flood consequence assessment, ground investigations, archaeological surveys, and so on and so forth. So they were completed, and a planning application went in for plot 1 at the waste transfer station in January of this year. And the latest I've heard is that it's likely to go to committee next month, so month of November. Okay, so this is a slide about our ongoing sort of discussions with Welsh Government. So in developing the planning application, we've also been obviously developing the detailed design for plot 1 for a waste transfer station at the brickworks. The detailed design costed it at about 7.8 million, which is obviously way in excess of the 2.7 million we've received from Welsh Government previously. So there are ongoing discussions with Welsh Government about meeting that funding gap. But one thing they have said is that they would like us actually to consider waste transfer station options on a wider basis, consider a number of different options, different sites to almost sort of future-proof what we need to do in terms of handling additional recycling tonnages, different types of separately collected material, to take accounts of things like the workplace recycling regulations, because now businesses are having to recycle a lot more waste than they previously did before, and also to consider decarbonisation of our collections fleet. So we've looked at some different options. Here's a flavour of some of the options that we can consider for working up. So there is the first bullet there is the waste transfer station at plot 1 at the Brickworks, in combination with doing the compliance works at Gother Bulking Station. If you recall, I mentioned that Gother Bulking Station is not currently compliant with its environmental permit. Making it compliant doesn't actually provide us any improvement in performance. It just makes us compliant with the permit. Second bullet there, waste transfer station at Brickworks plot 1 plus Gother Bulking Station redevelopment and upgrade. So that would involve us having a facility to handle residual waste transfer, the municipal waste transfer, plus it would improve the way we handle the recyclable waste that we collect. Second bullet up from the bottom there is about an integrated waste transfer and bulking station, and that would cover Brickworks plots 1 to 3. So that would cover all 3 of the main groups of waste that I spoke about in terms of being able to receive, store, handle, treat, and move on to subsequent treatment facilities. Then the last option that we looked at was would include the transfer and bulking station, as I just described, plus also a waste and recycling fleet depot over plots 4 to 6. So that would be the whole site. This is the current plots occupation at the Brickworks. Plot 1 is vacant. That's the site that we have the planning application submitted on. Plot 2 is occupied by Pwyllgor Wales waste facility on a 12-month lease, I believe. Plot 3 is currently under interim use by our own trunk road and response team, who've vacated Mockter offices to enable that site, so they're operating temporarily at plot 3. Plot 4's Glynno Evans, again short-term lease of 12 months, I believe, and the same for plot 6, which is Quantum Traffic Management. So just visually, that's how that looks. Yeah, top left, it's pretty small, isn't it, from up here? Plot 1, the yellowy is, yeah, sort of the yellow shaded area is plot 1. Plot 2 is a sort of salmon coloured next to it. Plot 3 is the grey. Plot 4 is the green. Plot 5 purple. Plot 6 is the blue. So that's just gives you an idea. Just a couple of slides on potential risks around this work. So firstly, if the preferred development does not include scope for improved recycling performance, then our ability to meet statutory recycling targets in the future could be compromised. So it's a statutory recycling target year this year of 70%. Now, we do recycle 70% in Conway, which is great, but we've kind of flatlined now for sort of 4 years, where we've been 70% for the last 4 years. So we do need to improve. Welsh Government, they haven't announced new targets yet, but they are sort of talking about it. It's likely that there'll be financial penalties, again, attributed to not meeting recycling targets. And just to put it into kind of context, failing to meet a target by 1% would be equivalent to about £100,000 fine for every percent that you fail by. If the preferred development option doesn't include residual waste transfer, then we would continue to rely on local third-party waste transfer providers. Very limited competition locally. So, you know, in terms of when you go out to tender, you can potentially be exposed to increase in prices when there is a lack of competition. if the development option doesn't include addressing the regulatory compliance issues that we have across the sites, then we could be exposed to further requests for capital to put that work in to make the sites compliant, because we'd be forced to do so by NRW, Natural Resources Wales. Last few now. So speaking with Welsh Government, there are lots of other authorities who are in the same boat as ourselves in terms of the waste infrastructure that they have, aging infrastructures, and they're looking to Welsh Government to fund developments. Now, the risk for us is that lots of these other authorities are behind where Conway are in terms of the performance that they're achieving, so that almost makes them more attractive to Welsh Government to fund their proposals, because they're likely to get probably more bang for their buck than we would, because we're already further down the track, further down the path in our recycling approach. So, you know, just for instance, you know, if a £10 million investment for a lower performing authority could give rise to a 10% increase in performance, similar sort of investment for ourselves might only result in a 5%. So we will be, you know, as a challenge, but the feedback we have from Welsh Government is that they're still looking to fund and really support trailblazing authorities as well, which was what we believe we are as a waste section within the council, and how we compare to other authorities. Final risk, and this is a risk for the authority as a whole. So Brickworks Plot 2, it does represent a risk to us because we have a huge waste stockpile on that site. I say we, there is a waste stockpile on that site under the current operator, and that would have to be removed, which would be expensive for anyone who wants to move onto that site subsequently. So whether or not this project moves on to Plot 2 or whether it doesn't, at some point that waste will have to be addressed. It is a live issue. Okay, last slide. So latest feedback from Welsh Government is that we have resubmitted our initial strategic project assessment to Welsh Government, and they've asked us to include some carbon monetary savings into that document. So just so Amanda doesn't get too excited, those carbon monetary savings are not cashable. They're a figure which Welsh Gov have put on each tonne of additional recycling. What does that mean in terms of carbon? And then there's an attached sort of formula to work out how much that is worth in cash, but it's not cashable. Once that is done, we'll receive feedback again from Welsh Government on what they feel about our preferred development option, or their preferred development option. And then finally, just to say no development option will be progressed until we know that funding is confirmed by Welsh Government. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jim. Really detailed run through, and thank you for the helpful slides. The first questions I have is from Councillor Andrew online, then Councillor Anne.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Jim. It's about a year ago we all met at Coepetla, and you showed us what the options were. I'm a bit disappointed that the options, I know they're going to Welsh Government, but I'd like to see what the costs are going to be, because they're totally different options. So, you know, to have one place remaining at its original place in Abergele, and another one being remade, or a new system made in Llandudno Junction, and I'd like to see the running costs. My biggest thing, and I won't no bones with it, I've been against this total redevelopment, and I understand that everybody loves to be a trailblazer and top the tree when it comes to recycling, and well done to everybody on that. But at the moment, we've got an incredibly good value at £220,000 a year to take all the black bin waste, all the curbside waste, all the other waste away to the incinerator, and we could never do that as cheap as that. Again, maybe you don't like me estimating things, but we would have to have our own operators, we have our own building, and we have to have the cost of running it all, our own contractors and taking that. You're talking 3 or 4 times. Because it's so cheap at the moment, because we do it with Thorncliffs, and they, of course, it's just part of their operation. So, but they take it to the incinerators for us, and it's an incredible value for money. We can't do that. So when you talk about budgets, like we just talked with previous reports and so on and so forth, suddenly we're going to be up to another £1 million on top just to run this place. And there's no figures in here. And I applaud officers for going forwards and wanting to make the actual infrastructure better. The Go for One, obviously, there was a fire management safety system supposed to go in. I think there was a business case approved for it last year, so I don't know what's happened there. Obviously, all the waste processing now at the moment for recycling is done at Abergele, the Go for Trip. There is more room to develop that. The landlord is quite happy to give some more land. You've got Denbighshire and Conway already processing our black waste there. So I really don't understand this new taking all the brickwork sites over. Obviously, I just need to see more figures. I don't think the figures are coming to us. The planning's come. So what option have you actually taken then? So you must have taken the plan option. So I'd like to know how you've done that and in what figures you're going to do. And the other thing is, and I've got to be careful what I say, but you've got a tenant there that last year you told me it would cost a sizable amount of money, 6 figures, to clear up. And nothing, from what I can gather with this report, has been done to try and mitigate or get this tenant to clear the site. And that is a risk. Now, £1 million is a big risk. So I obviously you put it in the report, it's not confidential, but what is this all about? So options, please. That's it. And I'm going out there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Cromway or Jim, who's going to answer in terms of the finance budget?
Obviously on the finance, that will be dependent on the scheme that's given final approval to go ahead. But on the case of the Govers site and the other developments, the Govers site has its limitations. We saw last week the consequences of the flooding in that area. So it is in a vulnerable area. We have to make sure that our facilities are basically sustainable going forward, and it's part of the reason why we are looking to rationalise our service. But I'm sure Jim can answer anything, or possibly answer on the question of finance.
Yeah, I think I picked up from the questions, Councillor Andrew. You talked about the running costs rather than the development costs there a little bit. So, yeah, the running costs for plot 1, which is the one we put the planning application in, that is to do residual waste transfer and handle the MRF, because the MRF would close to go to plot 1. The running cost would be the same as is currently required to run the MRF. So there's no increase in the running costs if plot 1 was redeveloped or developed. And the other thing, there's no issue using a third-party transfer station. But as I said earlier, there is a lack of competition. We've recently just done a procurement for the next term of this service, and there was one bidder. So that does leave you slightly exposed and higher risk. So I think it's better to be within our gift to control it and incorporate it under the running costs that we already have. In terms of clearing the waste on plot 2, now that's it's a site which is regulated by NRW. I think they do have enforcement notices against that that site, that operator, and then also our property services, I guess, in leasing the site to them, and they also need to be aware and incorporate any controls they can into that lease to make sure that they do have waste at a controllable level, and it is removed from site.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to come back on there. Thanks, Jim. Well, there's a couple of points. Firstly, Councillor Bromley was on about flood. There's 16 hectares of the old tip there, which you could quite easily do a waste transfer station on, which is over 2.5 metres above the floodplain, which is, so don't give me that the flood issue. And also the Gopher Transport recycling station is built on a concrete raft, which again, there's no issues in flooding. There is a river next to it, obviously, but it's a lot lower than that. You're talking about a waste transfer station. A waste transfer station, if you're going to handle, as I said, 200,000 tons of waste, or I can't 20 or 200. If you're going to handle the same as what forklifts are going to do, you're going to need more operators. You're going to need a big building. You're going to need all the infrastructure, and you're not going to be able to do it for 220,000, which is £3,000 a week. Now, currently, you were saying about only one bidder and so on and so forth. I know in 2019 they charged us £200,000. Now they're charging us £220,000. That's a £20,000 increase in 6 years. I think that's incredibly cheap after all the, when you think about inflation and diesel and, wage rises and so on and so forth. So why do you not work with a third sector party and then, work something between us where we keep the cost to a minimum and we can then improve our recycling systems and we can work with people. That Gopher site is a tip. Now you're talking about taking everything that we have we recycle and tip and black bin rubbish in the middle of Llandudno Junction, next to what is quite an industrial state of car and various other people. So tell me where I need to see the running costs. There's no way am I going to accept this with this proviso of it's going to be the same price. Not a cat and owl's chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. We're going to take. We've got next councillors Anne, Paul, and Sue. Councillor Anne, please. Oh, Anne's had to leave. Okay, Councillor Paul, then Councillor Sue.
Jim, just one specific question. Are we fully cited on Welsh Government's cost-benefit methodology? Because in a sense, the way you described it, my feeling was it sounds like a bit of a movable feast. Whereas if they're making a cost-benefit decision, which obviously they are, don't we as the local authority need to be fully cited on all the detail of that cost-benefit methodology so that our proposals are maximizing what that methodology says?
Yeah, it's a good question and a tricky one, I think. I think we're cited on it in the sense that we know that any authority that makes an application for funding to Welsh Government has to do it via standardised procedure, which is submitting an initial strategic project assessment, which we've done. So we know anyone else who's looking to put in for funding is doing that as well. Once it goes in and what discussions are taking place behind that, I think it is a little bit more unknown. So we don't really see the decision making once the ISPAs have been submitted.
So what you're saying is,
microphone on, please.
Whatever our business case is, we can't be certain we're maximizing the cost benefit methodology they use. Because my understanding, like on the flood defences, the reason we've been so successful is we've interrogated their cost benefit methodology, to absolute point. And then when we put our applications in, we know we got a pretty good chance of being successful on some of those bids. What I'm hearing from you is it's not quite as clear in this respect as, say, flood defences or whatever.
No, I don't think it is quite as clear as that. We have tried to sort of eke out as much information as we possibly can to give ourselves the best possible chance of being successful with funding, because the development options range. There's a wide range in costs from a couple of million right up to 20 million. We've been trying to eke out from them kind of level with this to see what sort of level of funding is realistic, what should we be pitching it at. But every other authority has been doing that as well, so we're just in the same boat.
Thank you both. Next, Councillor Sue online.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to speak today. Councillor Wood, Andrew has actually asked a few of my questions. Thank you for this report, Jim. My first one is actually about plot 2. It's about the cleaning up costs and responsibilities. If the company responsible from actually creating this mess doesn't actually do it, do we have an approximate cost that it's going to cost the council?
Oh, hang on, Councillor Sue. Matt is just going to come in now.
Yeah, it's not really something that we can discuss, Chair.
Thank you.
I think it's about focusing on the update and the proposal and the information in the report.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. I'll leave it there then, and then
Okay.
I will just email a few of my other questions.
Okay, Councillor Sue, I think judging by this, before we come to the other questions, I think there needs to be another meeting
Yeah.
to look at this issue, the funding, in light of the budget that we've had, the gloomy forecast again that we've
Okay.
before. I think there needs to be another meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I will email you directly.
Possibly in committee. Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go on. Who have we got next? Councillor Gareth next, please, in the room.
Yeah, just really going back to what Councillor Wood was saying with the 220,000, just to be clear in my mind, are we going to be paying more or less to actually dispose of that waste once we've gone through with the plans? And my other question is, have we benchmarked how much we're going to be paying, or how much other authorities are paying per tonne for the disposal of the waste that is actually going to Thorncliffe at the moment, so that we can actually judge whether we are getting value for money out of it or not? Thank you.
Okay, so just to be clear, it's about the transfer of waste. It's not the disposal of waste. The disposal of waste is on the regional 5 council contracts. So it's just about the transfer, which is depositing the waste, bulking it up, and then sending onwards to the disposal facility. It costs £220,000 a year at the moment to send it to third-party waste transfer station. If we were able to run our own waste transfer station with existing resources which are used to operate the material recycling facility, then that revenue cost is already there. So in theory, that should be a saving of the contract rate of £220,000.
Thank you very much. We've got councillors Abdul, Andrew, and Chris. Councillor Abdul.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to propose that we accept the recommendation, still in early stage, and it says the progress is still there. We still got a mountain to climb yet. So we'd just like to propose that we accept the recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Abdul. Have we a seconder for that? Councillor Dear. Okay, next, Councillor Andrew, please.
Very quickly, happy to accept the proposal. I would like to see some costings. When Jim says it goes between 2 million and 20 million, that's quite a variation, isn't it? And the other thing is, how much are we going to have to put towards it? Because Welsh Government are not going to put all this money towards it. So where are you going to get something? We're going to be borrowing over 25, 40 years. And Jim, the word should, it doesn't exist in council land. It should be the fact that how much does it cost to process the waste? Yes, you're right, it's a transfer system. So all our bin lorries go down there, They dump it into a great big shed, and then it's processed, as in fed into a lorry and goes to the incinerator in Flint. That's where it gets burnt. That's where it's done. We need to see exactly how much it's going to cost Conway to do it, and I think it's going to be 3 times the amount. Because at the end of the day, you've got to have building. You've got all the resources you need to have in that building, the staff in that building, the costs of maintaining that building. It just goes on and on and on. There's no way you can do it for the same amount of money. But hey, the other thing, really, we need to benchmark this, and Matt doesn't want to talk about it, and I'll keep out of it in some ways. There's a huge environmental issue down there. It's a year ago we spoke about it.
We're not talking about that.
Well, it needs to be sorted.
Councillor Andrew, but
well, it's in the report, Cheryl. It's in the report.
I know.
It's a risk. So we got to identify risks. My 2 risks here are that and the overspend and the cost of running that as a council. Ridiculous. No, they're absolutely ridiculous. We're trying to save money on budgets all the time. Schools, so on and so forth. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. We've got, and Andrew in the room.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to come back on the running costs again, because we debated this at length during the original scrutiny and cabinet hearings. We provided all the information. I think we discussed it again at this committee last July. So the proposal is the existing MRF transfer station at Bronanant Road, the staff and all the equipment there would transfer to the new site. And so the existing revenue budget from the MRF transfer station at Mochtra would transfer over to the brickworks, and we would dispose of the Mochtra, the transfer station site. There's an existing revenue budget there that's used for that's used for waste transfer. That budget would transfer over to a new site, paid for hopefully by Welsh Government, but as Jim emphasised, unless we get that grant, it won't go ahead. So we get a new site, easier to operate, can be operated with larger kit. We certainly see that the existing staff complement and running costs that are trying to make the best of a very difficult site on Bronanant Road. The amount of staff time just spent dealing with third-party deliveries and collections, queuing, rotating vehicles around the site on a new site can happen much smoother. So Jim sees that, and I agree, the revenue budget that is currently operating the Mochtra site will transfer to the brickworks, which would free up the current third-party contract costs to be a revenue saving. And that's the main reason we're doing this, is not to increase our costs, it's to reduce our costs, but also to reduce risk. It is certainly to have one supplier providing a service with which our whole service would fall down without is not a comfortable position for us managing the service to be in. It has cost us a lot of money previously when it was landfill. When we had one supplier of landfill and we're paying 3 times the amount of anyone else for landfill. And that was one of the reasons why we invested and were part of the partnership with setting up our facility at Park Adver. Same principles apply to this. We're trying to reduce cost, reduce risk, and have a facility that's under our control. But again, exactly the same arguments that we went through when we had the decision that we were going to go forward with this in the first place.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. I know we run massively over. Councillor Chris, briefly. Microphone, please.
Very briefly, I accept the arguments that officers are making that I don't understand the logic of them putting something forward that would increase costs. However, what I do think is that I was part of those original discussions, and there was a lot of discussions and there was a lot of details in that a lot of members today are not aware of, because it was in the previous administration. And I also hear the officers. There is issues here around disclosing the financial information, which could have an impact on us. So perhaps at some stage, we need to have a closed meeting where we can go through those detailed accounts and finances, so that we and the members understand. Because I think that, you know, we've had an election since we agreed all of this, and I think a lot of people are talking about things. I mean, I certainly look at it and think, "Look, that works and that works,
So
but how does that work?"
are you
So I
proposing that
I
we
think
have a report come
that
back, Councillor Chris?
we have to have another report, but that includes the business cases for moving the waste transfer station, but do it come to either a standalone meeting or a closed meeting that we can disclose that information. Because I do think, and I do hear members regularly asking questions about this, because of the fact that the discussions that we had were that long ago.
So you're proposing that we add, already made a note, we have a brief financial report come back to this committee to be considered as soon as we have all the figures. Could we? That's Councillor Chris, are you proposing
Yes,
that? I will second that. Councillor Gromway.
All that information was provided to the scrutiny committee back over 12 months ago. To go backward in the decision we've taken over 12 months ago is just going over old ground. We're trying to move forward, not go backwards.
Just for clarity, I'm not suggesting we go over revisit the decision. What I'm asking is that we give clarity to the members who weren't part of that decision-making process, so they understand how we reached that conclusion, and rather than in their minds struggling with the decision, and which is always going to be the case when we're trying to discuss something that includes confidential information in a public setting.
Andy, and then we're going to the votes.
Yeah, I think we're happy with that. I think the timing of it is, I think we always intended, once we got sort of a preliminary decision from Welsh Government as to whether or not they would be providing funding, that we would then be coming back to democracy with the full business case, which would have been submitted, with essentially seeking approval to go ahead. So I think we plan to do that anyway, but I'm happy if it's a resolution. I think the issue about what can and can't be discussed wasn't to do with sort of finances or operating costs. We're quite happy to discuss those. It was about the contractual arrangements around a particular lease with one particular tenant, which couldn't be discussed in a public meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul, are you happy to add into your proposal that Councillor Chris, that we have a further financial report come back to this committee? Are you content with that?
Chair, of course, as we would do, because as I said, we got mountain to climb it. We got to have the grant first, and as Andrew said, they will bring it anyway. So if we could say yes, when they get the opportunity, they bring it. Absolutely yes, but not early stage. I think we're still in early stage, but when they feel the officers feel right time to bring the report, absolutely yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Neer, are you happy to second that? Yes, lovely deal. Okay, members, that's the amended proposal. Would everyone like to show, please, in favour of that? 4 in the room and 4 on the right. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone from ERF. We now come on the best till last. Here we go. We've got welcome to Councillor Dilwyn. You missed the thanks I gave you before as my right-hand man. So welcome you in your new role today. You're going to give us a brief introduction, and then Sian is going to present the report. We've all read the report extensively. So if you'd like to start, please, Councillor Dilwyn. Your microphone, please, Councillor Dilwyn. We can't hear translation.
Yeah.
Haven't got you.
Dach chi'n clywed wan? Pawb yn glwad? Na ni, diolch yn fawr. Mae siwr di'r cyflwyniad ddim cweit mor byr os ydych chi wedi licio o'r cadeirydd o mi nai o gynfyred os yw bosib. Mae'n rhoi bleser i mi gyflwyno'r adroddiad yma ar trosolwg a craffu blynyddol ar gyfer 24.
Change the
Must
channel.
just be hours.
No, just change
Really
the
bad
channel, it's fine.
feedback. No, okay, carry on, Councillor.
Ydw i'r rhy agos? Diolch well os ni'n elw hwnna'n fach bethau. A'n ymlaen pymnag. Mae'r adroddiad yn brwgolwg ar y gwaith sydd wedi wneud gan y 4 pwyllgor craffu yn ystod blwyddyn ddiwethaf y cyngor. Dwi'n falch o fod wedi bod yn rhan o'r broses honno yn 23-24 fel isgadeirydd o'r pwyllgor yma, ac felly dwi'n llwyr ymwybodol o'r gwaith sy'n mynd i mewn i broses craffu. Y gefnogaeth sydd yn cael ei ddarparu a faint mae'r swyddogaeth craffu'n gael ei gwerthfawrogi yng Nghonwy gan aelodau a swyddogion. Dydw i ddim am sôn am fanylion y gwaith, mae swyddogion yma i wneud hynny. Hynny, dwi'n meddwl bod hi'n bwysig i mi dynnu sylw at rai o prif bwyntiau. Mi gafodd 2 o weithdai hunan asesu craffu eu cynnal ym mis Mawrth eleni a nifer dda o aelodau yn craffu yn y 2. Ac mae themau sydd wedi codi o'r trafodaethau i'w gweld yn yr adroddiad blynyddol. Mi roedd y wybodaeth yma hefyd wedi'w gynnwys mewn adroddiad i'r Pwyllgor Gwasanaethau Democrataidd ym mis Medi, ac mae'n deg dweud bod awch gan yr aelodau i edrych ar y ffordd rydyn ni'n craffu yng Nghonwy, nid i'w gwanhau mewn unrhyw ffordd, ond i chwilio am arferion gorau a dod â hyd i'r ffyrdd gwell o wneud pethau fel i bod ni, fel awdurdod, yn canolbwyntio ar graffu ar y pethau cywir. Does dim awgrym o gwbl i leihau rôl na cyffredinolrwydd y broses craffu, ond mae adnoddau'n brin ac mae'n rhaid i waith craffu ganolbwyntio ar y materion lle mae'r gallu i ychwanegu gwerth. Mi wnaeth y Pwyllgor Gwasanaethau Democrataidd hefyd yn gywir ddigon o hirio unrhyw argymhelliad i'r cyngor am adolygiad ffurfiol yng Nghonwy gan fod y Pwyllgor yn aros am fwy o wybodaeth. Bwythodaeth gyn Llywodraeth Cymru. Mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn mynd i gynnal trafodaethau yn fuan iawn, does em dyddiad i roed ar hwnnw, felly da ni yn aros tan hynny i gael gweld be fydd Llywodraeth Cymru yn ystyried ar y pwyntiau fydd yn dod ymlaen. Wedi dweud hynny, mae aelodau yn Conwy'n awyddus i wella'r drefn mor fuan â phosib a dydyn ni ddim yn sefyllian yn sicr. Mae'r Pwyllgor Gwasanaethau Democrataidd wedi gwneud cais ac mi ydyn ni wrthi'n edrych ar arferion da ar hyn o bryd fel bod cysondeb yn y ffordd mae pob un o'r 4 Pwyllgor Trosolwg a Craffu'n gweithio. Mi fydd y Pwyllgor Gwasanaethau Democrataidd yn trafod adolygiad ffurfiol bosib o'r trefniadau craffu ym mis Tachwedd mwyn gallu gwneud unrhyw newidiadau sy'n cael ei awgrymu erbyn blwyddyn ariannol 25-26. Mae presenoldeb yn dal yn uchel iawn, mae aelodau canmol am hynny, misg ein holl bwyllgorau craffu a chyfertaledd presenoldeb o 87% yn dangos ymroddiad aelodau yng Nghonwy. Mi gynyddodd nifer cyfarfodydd y Pwyllgor Craffu yn 23-24 gweithaf gorfod gohirio ambell gyfarfod yn ystod y cyfnod hwnnw oherwydd retholiad mis Mai. Mae'r rhaid i mi ddiolch i'r caderyddion ac is-caderyddion y Pwyllgorau Craffu am ei dealltwriaeth o hyn pan mae angen newid trefniadau cyfarfodydd mewn cyfnod cyn-atholiad. Rydyn ni i gyd yn gwybod bod na rai materion nad oes bosib eu trafod yn ystod y cyfnod hwnnw, ond mae tîm y Gwasanaethau Democrataidd yma yng Nghonwy wir yn gwerthfawrogi'r gefnogaeth mae nhw wedi gael. Ac na i ychwanegu eto fan'na fyd, da ni gyd fel aelodau yn gwerthfawrogi gwaith nhw. Tîm bach ydyn nhw, ac mae nhw wedi medru cefnogi cyfarfodydd yn ystod y cyfnod etholiad a gweinyddu'r etholiad ar un un pryd, a wedi gwneud hynny'n ardderchog. Felly, yn wir, oedd hi yn y cyfnod etholiad cyffredinol ym mis Gorffennaf eleni. A chyn llued y rhybudd wedi cael ei roi i ni am resymau nad ydyn ni'n wybod am. Mae'r adroddiad hefyd yn cyfeirio at drefniadau cyfarfodydd hybrid a sut maen nhw'n helpu ac yn cefnogi'r aelodau i gymryd rhan. Mi fyddai'n fai arna i beidio cydnabod gwaith y tîm gwasanaethau democrataidd i gefnogi'r cyfarfodydd yma. Nid hawdd ydy hynny, yn bennaf gan fod y system sydd yma maen nhw'n ddefnyddio yn system sydd yn mynd i dipyn o oed, ond mi fyddwn ni'n gobeithio bod unrhyw system newydd sydd yn cael ei ystyried yn rhan o system yn coed pella yn cydnabod y problemau yma a'r angen am system sy'n addas at heddiw ar dyfodol. Felly, mae'n bleser gynnau gyflwyno yr adroddiad yma i'r Pwyllgor a diolch i'r gwaith ar Aron wneud online ni ac hefyd i'r swyddogion i gyd. Diolch fawr iawn.
Diolch, Councillor Dilwyn, for that. Sean, have you anything?
You'll be very glad to hear that I'm not going to go into the detail of the report, because I am confident that you have all read it. So, but mainly just thanks to Dawn for bringing all the information together to populate the annual report that's attached at the appendix. The appendix, the actual annual report details the work of all the 4 scrutiny committees, what it's done in 2023-24. The activity relating to the scrutiny and wider democratic function during the year is detailed within paragraph 3.4. And as Councillor Dilwyn has touched on, we had the workshops, really well attended, really good themes coming from that. And those themes are listed in the second bullet point. So just to touch on those, the need for balance between pre and post scrutiny. So members can evaluate the impact of scrutiny, measure success and identify whether the outcomes have been realised. That would also provide tangible evidence to inform the annual reports going forward. Work groups are also keen to make better use of task and finish groups to undertake more in-depth reviews. And then Appendix 2 to the report provides the further detail on the feedback from those sessions. Lots of other activities undertaken during the year as well. So we touched there upon the training that we've done. We've revamped some of the web pages, and that includes the new web page that looks at where the recordings of meetings sit. We also developed the petition scheme, we introduced decision notices, and then we have developed a digital scrutiny topic form so that members find it easier to put suggestions forward. I think it would also be remiss of me not to mention the positive feedback that came through the Estin inspection and about the scrutiny that our Education Scrutiny Committee did. Again, we have our local performance indicators. The main ones are listed in paragraph 3.66. As Councillor Dilwyn has said, attendance levels have remained high, and there's a further breakdown by committee on page 458. Number of meetings increased, and again, there's more details about the number per committee within the actual annual reports. We try to encourage public participation as much as possible, and we've had a number of public speakers recently, which is really good to see. The live streaming and recording of all our meetings is key. People do watch them. Paragraph 3.7 there shows that see that the viewing figures have increased, with 582 views for the special meeting of Economy and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee when it was considering the dog control orders. But the actual annual report gives a breakdown and average viewing figures per committee, and that can be found on page 460. And then it's just the proposals going forward for 2024-25. The main one is, as Councillor Dillwyn has touched on, about the work that we want to do about potential scrutiny review. It's on hold at the moment, as Councillor Dillwyn has said, but that isn't to say that we're not going to pick up on the existing good practice that we have got in Conway, and we are proactively taking that forward. Otherwise, Chair, I'm not going to say any more. I can respond to any questions from members.
Thank you very much for that, Sian. And all of us in this room really know that it's you and Dawn are the most important people in this council. We wouldn't run without you, would we? And we're all scared of you anyway, so it's fine. But no, just a huge thank you for all the work, and to all the chairs, vice chairs, past and present, who've done this, and the cabinet members, obviously. Really important. Without scrutiny, you know, we're not an effective council. So thank you to everyone involved. Any questions or observations, members? Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thanks. Just like to reiterate, you know, my point of view is on the scrutiny is that I think we're probably doing too much pre-scrutiny and not enough scrutiny of the actual outcomes of decisions made. And some of that is covered in the report. And my other observation is that, you know, 80% of our budget is spent on education and social care. Yet looking at the numbers of meetings of education and social care, 6 meetings in 12 months, and social care 7 meetings. Maybe if we're looking to transform things and move matters forward, we should be moving a little bit more pace in those areas. And I suspect, you know, if another job, if you put the number of hours each committee sat for, Sian, I'm just feeling jealous, I am, because I seem to be sat here for most of the day when we come here, and it's mainly my fault, so I'll shut up. Yes.
Yes, well, I'm glad we recognise this is the hardest working committee. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Gareth. Is anyone else? Does anyone want to put? Councillor Chris, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I'm not a member of this committee, but I am a member of the Democratic Services Committee, and we had a very interesting debate about this, because what came very strongly out of that was that members don't want scrutiny diminished. And you're nodding your head, and I know you agree with that. But there was an acknowledgement that we've got to make it more effective and perhaps less resource intensive. And we know that Sian's team's going to be very busy when we move the chamber over to Coed-Petler. There's going to be a lot of work setting up the new chamber and getting that all right and everything. And that's the bit that I really worry about, is the resources for all this. Because as Amanda, sitting in front of me, has pointed out so strongly, we're going to have a big budget shortfall, and there's going to have to be cost savings. So that's what gives me a headache. And I just wonder, personally, Chair, what you made of the workshops. Did you think they did give some positive outcomes? And do you think we are heading on the right path to prioritise scrutiny? Councillor Gareth mentioned post-scrutiny, which we all agree could be very valuable, but then we can't keep all this very lengthy and involved pre-scrutiny. So just wondered what your personal take on this was.
Well, unfortunately, my personal take was I had 2 members of family in hospital for both of the groups, so I wasn't able to make them, but I caught up with exactly what happened afterwards, and I've been through the report in detail and taken I've listened to the members. I've had feedback from them about that. But yes, you can't overstate the importance of scrutiny, but we absolutely recognise that going forward things are going to be incredibly difficult. So thank you. Would anyone like to propose this excellent report? Councillor Hannah, thank you. And Councillor Chris will second it. Thank you. So if everyone would like to show in favour, I do hope. Anyone against? Oh, three. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? No. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And it's been a long meeting, but those topics had to be covered. So, deal, everyone. We should just wait for Dawn to switch us off from the outside world.